Yeah, that brings us live.
Are we live?
We should be going live any moment now.
Any moment. Oh, it says live up in the corner.
Yeah, we're live now. Awesome.
Excellent.
Alrighty.
Now, is this surfer dude Andrew?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Good to meet you, man. Good to meet you. Hello.
Yeah, nice to meet you. We're waiting on Zoltanis. Hey, I got folks that want to watch. Where's this going to be?
Hold on. I'll send you the link there for you.
Yeah, it's on Fascist Radio.
Yep, it's on Fascist Radio YouTube channel.
All right, yeah. Somebody just please send it to me in Telegram.
Yeah, send it to you right there. Andrew.
All right, let me check. Oh, I see it there. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Go on, shoot.
Let me see. Let me post this on Discord also.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're waiting on Zolt here.
Yeah, waiting on Zolt right now.
Awesome.
All right.
Let me give him a text.
So, Andrew, how you doing tonight?
Doing good. How are you, my friend?
I can't complain. I had to rush back here from a party.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, Andrew, you said it was your daughter's birthday, right?
Yeah, my oldest daughter. Today wasn't her birthday, but we did her birthday party today.
Well, happy birthday to her.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
How old is she turning, if I may ask?
She's 10. My oldest is 10. My oldest is 12, but my oldest daughter is 10.
All right. That's a good age. That's a good age, in my opinion, to live your life.
She's great.
Very odd way to word that one, but.
Well, I don't know. Being 10 years old for me personally it's kind of nostalgic because it's the whole
simpler
before.
Times, right?
Yeah. Simpler times. Before before my dive into politics and everything. I was just a normal person. you can say.
Oh, Zoltanis has joined us. Hello there, Zolt.
Hey,
Zolt, my brother. How you doing?
I just been jamming out the music.
Bass.
Been playing Mulan. Have you ever heard of that game?
No.
Nah, never heard of it.
It's like Dark Souls. I spent 4 hours on the first boss.
Wait, Elden? Wait, are you talking about Elden Ring?
No, it's a game made in China, but it's basically like Dark Souls and Elden Ring. It just has Chinese cultivator martial arts and demons and dragons and stuff all over it.
Okay, makes sense now because I was
super nerdy shit.
All right, fair enough.
All right, my bad. I was having some technical difficulties.
All right, there we go. Octavian's back with us.
Mm-hmm.
Just some
Yeah,
shit.
Heimbach didn't want to do this as he said philosophy is gay.
Well, I'm not going to say he's right, but he's not wrong.
It's not for everyone, right? It's not for everyone.
Yeah, it's not for everybody.
But actually, Zolt, I don't think we've ever actually met before. I think I've antagonized you from afar, but I think when your original drama with the Shamazites went down, I was on a break from the whole thing, so
he wasn't present for it all.
Yeah, I think I caught
the past is the past, right? We had our fun sniping at one another. Now we can settle everything here.
All right. Well, let's.
Well, you should go over the topic, the set up the structure I was hoping to go with for this debate. We have Dark here as the moderator, right, to keep everything more or less civil and to make sure that we get our points out more concise for everybody watching, right?
Yeah, true. Now, hold on, Seamus. Now, everybody, this night is about, being professional. It's about, using your words, not speaking over people whatsoever. Let either Zoe or Andrew or Octavian or Seamus, speak their minds and be respectful as can be.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now,
the topics that we're going to discuss tonight, Andrew here added one at the later moments there after a bit of talking. There are 6 core points in total, although we may discuss some more topics, probably asked by the chat or whatever, if we are pretty concise. The 6 of them are how does your respective movement intend to end neoliberal capitalism, right? I guess we could talk about the concepts of activism, right? And if you're familiar with Huey Long's 100 Days, right? My First 100 Days, something like that as well, if we have the time. Philosophical underpinnings. We're both, we'll both state our philosophical underpinnings, of course, is pretty self-explanatory. Economic model discussion, which covers the economic models of the various groups. I'm pretty sure you guys describe yourselves as national Bolsheviks. Am I right?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, we can describe the differences in systems and whatnot. And then race, clarifying both group stances. Right. Usually a very controversial point. Thought it might be good to cover. Foreign policy. Now on your guys' channel, you refer to this as Ukraine v. Russia, although I feel it's a much more expansive concept.
Multipolarity. Really?
Yeah, like things like China and the Middle East and everything are also important topics that should be covered with good respect. And then 6, the topic of homosexuality, right? And you described it as homosexuals in the movement. That's a fine way to describe it, in my opinion. Just sort of like the place for minorities' sexuality, right?
Yeah, when it comes to the geopolitics and the homo stuff, I would prefer Heimbach to come on for that stuff. But I'm only here for. I don't think he's going to join, but I only really want to talk economics, philosophy. It's about it.
That's fair.
That's okay. I mean, I'm not talking about everything either.
I'm
more here for the philosophy and economics.
He's got this big rant he's going to go on about March at some point if we let him.
But yeah, those are the 6 points. I was hoping that with Dark here for moderation, we could split these up into concise 5 or 10 minutes at most, sections where basically you lay out your policy, right? And then we take a break, and then the other side lays out their policy, and then we discuss both policies and compare and disagree or agree wherever, right? Do you feel that's a good way to go forward there, guys?
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. Everybody settled in there? Everybody where they want to be?
Yeah.
Only way I'm gonna leave is something crazy happens.
Give me 1 second. I just gotta check something real quick.
Will we do introductions?
Sure. We can do introductions while Lord Dark sets himself up. If you want to go first, there, Andrew.
All right.
Oh wait, I ain't forced myself up, but I'll let all you guys go first because it's basically my channel, so I'm gonna go last anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, awesome.
That's fair.
All right. I am Andrew, and I'm the chairman of the Patriotic Socialist Front. A lot of people call me the surfer dude. I've seen a few comments on it. I'm cool with it. I come from a background that is basically rooted in traditional national Bolshevism from a Pytel standpoint, as well as Juche and a little bit of Evola. Yeah, that's where I come from kind of ideologically. But having said that, I'm also dogmatically anti-intellectual. So a lot of the philosophy type stuff I will defer to Zoltanis unless I need to, because there's some issues we don't agree on either. But that's where we are with that. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Yeah. Zoltanus run YouTube channel, then Fascio Substack. That's really about it. Involved in a white nationalist movement for a long time. Got disenfranchised with it, so I'm just doing something new.
All right, good choice. I'm Seamus, a bit of a controversial figure myself. I write mostly for philosophy. I used to have my own website, but since the move to Ukraine, I've had to drop that initiative to the various affiliate groups who follow the teachings I've set forth there. I sometimes pitch in co-write with the National Fascist Party, give them assistance where I can, as well as other movements such as our British, Irish, German affiliates, stuff like that.
All right. So I'm Octavian. I'm the chairman of the National Fascist Party. I've been reading and studying alongside Seamus for probably about 3 years now, something like that. And he's taught me a lot. I've definitely learned a lot from him, and I've also learned a lot just from being at the head of one of these groups and working with all these various people under me. Like there's a lot that I'm learning, and I'm still learning. But yeah, that's basically it. There's not much else to say.
All right.
Dark.
Well, I'm Lord Dark, as you all know, the co-host of the Position Radio. My background mainly comes from either Mosaites, integralism, sometimes Phalangism, dabble here and there. But all around, I want to say classical fascist, regardless. Goebbels is, my right-hand man of all times, the base propagandist he is. Anyways, sadly he cannot be here tonight, which is a shame. But what can you do? When your minister of propaganda is always busy. But I'm here to help moderate this debate between these two fine groups, these fine people, these elegant gentlemen, if you prefer, to once and for all settle their differences and then move on.
Well put. Well put.
Well, good.
Now, let's go off the first topic. To end liberal capitalism. Now, it's a free game. Anyone can grab it. Just be respectful.
Would you like to start first there, Andrew?
Sure. The Patriotic Socialist Front believes that the only way we can end the kind of current neoliberal system is by uniting all forces of illiberalism. It has to be attacked from within and without. And what we've seen in the movement for so long is a kind of autistic purity spiral. Oh, we're this, we're that, we're this, we're that. And anybody that doesn't conform to those positions either gets exiled or whatever, what have you. Basically, right and left synthesis, unity, is how we are going to end neoliberalism. And that's one prong. The other prong, I would say, is by aligning internationally with the forces of illiberalism. This would mean Russia, China, Iran, anywhere that opposes what I call the gay global American empire is our ally. As Limonov had said, to paraphrase him, there's no longer right or left. There's only the system and the enemies of the system. And you have to decide which side you're on. And my enemy is the globalist American empire. Anybody opposed to that is my ally and the ally of the Patriotic Socialist Front.
Well, that was very concise. Thank you there, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yes, thank you, guys.
So I guess I would say that the NFP's policy on this is always that We wish to build a movement that is organically of the working class, and the best way that we can do this, and I actually outlined this in a recent article, is the beginning of these syndicates and trade unions that are politically charged, but they are founded in the vein of the old style of syndicate and trade union that we used to have in the United States, right, where there was a direct combative confrontation with the status quo, with the bourgeoisie before the party can even come to power, right? This is something that will be happening long before there's ever a fascist government in power. When the fascist government inevitably comes to power, a lot of these syndicates will eventually become a part of the new lower house that we've envisioned, which would be a corporative system. Essentially, these trade unions would elect from amongst themselves, and they would send these representatives to the government. And essentially, that's the first step, right? You're tearing down liberalism by, instead of power being in the hands of, inevitably at the end of the day, money, it's directly in the hands of the people who are electing people who are working in the exact same field as them. Regarding capital, we've discussed that things like the stock exchange would be gotten rid of in exchange for a community-based investment project. There's all sorts of things that you can do there. A big part of it for us is that we want to nationalize all industry and bring a lot of our industry home too. That's the big thing, is that right now America's economy currently relies extremely on foreign nations, and we cannot remain self-sufficient that way, especially when the global geopolitical scene is changing very rapidly, and it is very rapidly falling out of the favor of America. Nations like China are now more openly antagonistic towards the United States. So I think that it's more realistic to say that we should inevitably look towards a future where we can support ourselves, and I think that a corporatist system is the best way in which we can do that.
Well, I believe that opens up more for discussion now. Andre, you brought up the point of allying against illiberalism, right? Against the concept of liberalism, that being the core enemy of your movement and the core driving factor. It's a very important point. I agree, but to abandon the essence of what makes America and the West as a whole such a primary factor in the world by destroying that empire that has been built, although by liberalism, would be to waste centuries of work by the predecessors and whatnot to hegemonize the American and Western ideals across the world, right?
I'm so. Oh, I don't mean to interrupt you. If I am,
No, go ahead. That's why I was pausing so that you could
okay,
answer my question.
yeah. So Yoki had a wonderful quote.
Yoki.
Oh, here we go.
I have no respect for English. Don't
That's fine.
worry about it.
Andrew, I mispronounce everything as well. No problems there.
I'm
Sounds like Loki.
anti-intellectual proudly.
Just say Loki
46 IQ.
from Thor lore.
As I was saying, Yoki, he has a great quote that belongs here. I'm gonna kind of recite a couple as I extrapolate. Liberalism can only be defined negatively. It's a mere critique. It's not a living idea. What he's saying here is that liberalism is a universal solvent. Over time, all it can do is destroy. So Western civilization.
That's actually very an interesting quote. If I might just quickly interject there, because I have a quote that actually supports that. Mussolini, in his speech to the corporations in 1933, talks about how liberalism is no longer the constructor, which is what I was referring to by having built up this hegemony of the West, right? But it's no longer the constructor; it's become a disease, a malignant tumor within the psyche of people living under it, right? So I think there's good overlap there between opposing liberalism, but not opposing the heights liberalism has dragged the West to, right?
Yeah, I think that's where the distinction is. It's I don't necessarily think the West having a great level of power internationally is a bad thing. I just think that the way that power is exercised is bad.
Well, my issues with the power structure itself is that this is probably going to trigger Andrew a bit, but it's inherently a white supremacist power structure to destroy all nations outside of the Western hemispheres. That's what liberalism is, because it's manifested out of Anglo-Saxon ideology that is basically went throughout the entire West and poisons the well for all these nations from Iran, the Middle East, to like China, Russia. And we can also look at the expansion of NATO into the East, then all these genocides and extraction of resources from the third world into the West, and trying to maintain that type of power structure itself seems like you just want to maintain that type of supremacy that liberalism already has. You're just giving it some rhetoric of legitimacy, because if we look at the substance and form of what's manifesting in the real world, even if you're giving rhetoric or lip service to maintain it, you're basically defending what's already in existence itself. And that's like a point that I've heard Infrared bring up against people that he's debated who talk about this stuff.
Point up before as well.
And yes, and it is something that is manifested, because if we look at reality, we see people who want to maintain liberal hegemony have been white supremacist neo-Nazis, some classical fascists, and then of course liberals, all uniting against the Russians and the Chinese, who seem to be the only ones fighting the global power structure. At least that's from how I understand it.
To a degree, that's a very thoughtful bring up, like a thoughtful point you've brought up there. It is true that liberalism and the West in general rose to power from the Enlightenment onwards due to very violent and very exploitative means, right? But it feels I guess, reductivist to believe that if the East would have had a similar enlightenment and explosion of technological advancement in its later years, that it wouldn't have done the exact same thing in response, right? If you look at the substance reality of historical expansionism, China, Japan, right, all these nations, had they had the same renaissance, the same explosion of the brand new ideas and whatnot, that brought these nations into the forefront in the West, despite their small size and small population, then they would have done the exact same things in the exact same way. We'd be in the exact opposite concept.
I mean,
right?
that's
That's
sort
like
of what happened.
Yeah,
if I
right.
can interject real quick,
Sorry, go ahead there, Octavian.
If I can interject real quick, that is sort of what happened, right? Especially, you brought up Japan. When Japan had its rapid industrialization, I think it's something like in 100 years, they did what took Britain it was less than 100 years.
It was in 40 years they did what Britain took 200 to do, right?
Yeah.
It was that rapid
incredibly
explosion.
quick. And
immediately
Japan,
with that power, they started invading other people.
Yeah, they started invading other countries because they needed resources. They needed raw materials to sustain the industrial machine. It seems to be a reality of industrial society itself that you're always going to have that constant creep of resources.
Right, and you make a good point about the tragedy of it, and I agree. It is a tragedy. It is a horrific fact that the West committed genocides and still does, through capitalism, exploit third world countries in Africa and in the Middle East. It is a tragedy and a travesty and something terrible. But that does not mean just because we want to maintain Western hegemony that this is going to be something that is continued, right? It just means that it's going to be something that is rapidly and radically changed by the system of the hegemonic power, which would be America, right?
So one thing I can think of is that China, when it was at its peak as like an existing empire, like before we had the British invade,
talking like Ming
so
and Qing dynasty era?
Yeah, before China was invaded by the British, when they were forced to smoke opium, which really was the peak, which of their empire.
Yep.
They never expanded, and
well, that's
I can also Japan. The reason why Japan had that type of reaction itself in the first place wasn't because they wanted pure resource abstraction. It's because it was about kicking the West out of Asia, and you can see that with Subhash Bose or multiple other leaders of the Orient that went with the Chinese. And I can actually pull up a Rene Guénon quote from Crisis of the Modern World, but it says, in particular, the West cannot count on industry any more than the modern science that is irreceptible from it to serve as a basis for an understanding with the East. If Easterners bring themselves to accept this industry as an unpleasant and transitory necessary, it will only be a weapon to enable them to resist the invasion of the West to safeguard their own existence. And we can see that because the West has always been reacting and trying to expand into the East, whereas the East has always been defending itself, which is why we have Chinese and Russian antagonism in the first place.
That's
It was the West
Although
that
I
also
don't
kicked
know.
off the Cold War with
Hold
the
on.
Russians, which comes back from Mackinder and Karl Heushofer, which was about heartland theory.
If I may, so it's an interesting point that you raised that that the West was aggressive from its beginning. To the contrary, with the historical record, we can find that China, especially in its area of Renaissance, the Ming and Song and Qing dynasties, right, about 600, I think, or 700 years of history, just before Taiping Rebellion and the Opium Wars, right, is where it about ended. China was a expansionist and violent power. China did not recognize the existence of any other country on Earth. It maintained that it had the mandate of heaven to rule the whole world. It invaded Indochina, it invaded Tibet, it invaded the Middle East to a degree, making it as far as Afghanistan in some cases, right? The issue is that China had so many people in it that it couldn't maintain the stability of such a vast empire. The more cohesive and smaller empires of the West, which were compacted into these small countries that had to get together, never had the same issues as China with its massive population, which China has always had, the hundreds of millions of people living in China, which allowed them
Seamus,
to do these
I'd like
expansions.
to jump in here.
Sure,
Just
go ahead,
before
Andrew.
anybody else goes in. No, you can finish your point. I just wanted to, before anybody
Okay,
else
I'll
jumps.
just wrap it up quick. But yes, the East had equally had its era of expansion. In fact, you had Chinese diplomats in the courts of the Eastern Roman Empire towards its end. I'm thinking 13, 14, early 1400s, 1300s, and even the 1200s after the Latin Empire took over, right? Where the Byzantine court was almost sometimes controlled by a certain Chinese diplomats that were coming in and enforcing by their trade and control, right? And then later on came the Turks as well in that era as well, who invaded from the east into the west and conquered swaths of the Middle East, conquered Anatolia, conquered Greece, conquered parts of southern Europe and whatnot. And their empire stretched from, at its most extent, northern like Serbia and Bosnia, all the way over to the border of Iran. Right, even though they came from Mongolia and the steppes to the immediate west of Mongolia.
Before Andrew makes his
Well,
point here, this
yeah,
is really quick.
we should let Andrew make his point, but okay.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I've got this comment pulled up, and I just don't want to lose it. But go ahead.
Here, go ahead and address the comment. I can remember what I'm going to say.
So Chinese expansionism is the equivalent of Italian Mussolini's New Rome or Mussolini's Lebensraum or Dukin's Eurasianism. I will never understand fascist anti-empire sentiment. Well, we're not saying that because China was expansionist or has an empire that's bad. What we're saying is that it's merely a reality. The reality is that there are certain spheres in the world where greatly powerful nations like the United States or China or Russia have casted their influence over other nations, either directly or indirectly, and that these spheres of influence are in competition with one another or sometimes collaboration. But generally speaking, they will inevitably rival one another in some way. That's
exactly
the point.
We want multiple spheres of influence, not just one.
Well, there already
two.
are multiple spheres of influence. There are probably 3, I would argue. Although one of them is in collaboration with the other. That's BRICS, right? Russia and China.
Yeah, because the European continent's in collaboration with North America. But I'll let Andrew go.
Yeah, let Andrew.
So on a to kind of flip it on its head here, I'm not even necessarily against. And let me preface this by saying that this is going to be, give me 5-10 minutes or so. I'll
okay, go ahead.
Let you know when I'm done. Just bear with me because I got to go through a few different points here. Firstly, I'm not necessarily against militancy, imperialism, or expansionism. My biggest problem with the last 200 years of historical European expansionism and imperialism was the purpose. If you go look at the British African colonies, they never produced profit for England. They existed for the British taxpayers to subsidize these people. You can go look at persons like the arch imperialist himself, Rudyard Kipling. Some of his language, the way he described the idea of a duty, the white man's burden, that he has, that Europe owes something to Africa, that Europe owes to India and to all these places to bring civilization, to send your best sons to go die to build them roads and hospitals. The purpose of empire in the liberal conception was to benefit people outside of Europe. They taxed their own people in order to benefit others. And
you're absolutely correct.
if you are a nationalist,
Yeah, I was going to say,
obviously
I agree.
you cannot support this. The second issue I want to bring up is what you were just talking about, various other empires. And I disagree with Zolt on this. I think basically the beginning of European imperialism was self-defense. We got invaded by the Moors, we got invaded by the Turks, the Mongols,
Well, it
etc.,
goes
etc.,
back way
etc.
farther than that, man.
I don't think it was the other people. I just think it was a reaction to the British.
Yeah, like the East had the Western migration from the East had been a history of things that going way back to even the Grecian times.
I never get a chance to bring this up. We in our modern day are so lucky that we do not have to deal with the risk of some random horde arriving from the east and burning down
just
all our
arriving
shit.
on horses and killing everybody and
You know,
enslaving
but
the
that
West.
shit had been happening in Europe since ancient times, like since even like before the Iron Age, there had always been constant migrations coming in from the east.
But look,
even the Aryans, right? The famous
term.
Aryans, they came from India, right? And they came on their horses and they wrecked the Celts, right? The mainland Celts who had been living in Austria, Switzerland, and Germany, and pushed them to the west, right? This kind of this cycle of violent migration from the east is, in my opinion at least, what caused a response from the West once it became a Renaissance power, right?
Yeah, okay, and I basically agree with that. I mean, I would say before the Renaissance, if you look at even the Reconquista in Spain, basically
absolutely, that was just
every
pure response.
population in Europe. It wasn't just the Spanish. I mean, like for example, Lisbon in Portugal during the Reconquista, English knights are who liberated Lisbon from the Moors, not Spanish. I mean, so basically every population in Europe participated in this. And one of the most defining moments of Spanish history was this thing, the Day of 100 Virgins. The Moors basically put a tribute on the last Christian kingdoms there. They wanted 50 noble virgins and 50 commoner virgins per year. And this was to add to their harems, rape, etc. And this led to who used to be the national saint of Spain, a guy named Saint James Moorslayer. He overthrew the king, put another king in power who was not willing to compromise with the Moors. So like this rapaciousness and violence towards Europe, in my opinion, that is what initially motivated the idea of an outside aggression from Europe.
Exactly. And if I may touch on your point on liberal empires, actually, I found that a very interesting point. It is absolutely correct. But additionally, these empires built things to be exploitative, right? They used the African people with the white savior shit that was made up by the imperialists of Britain and whatnot. They used this as an excuse to see the African peoples in their petty kingdoms and whatnot as subhuman and to be controlled, right? As a means to attack them and to destroy them and control them, and then build them into what they saw fit as a civilization. And it led to mass exploitation of these countries, not just in Africa, but in the Middle East and in the Far East, in the case of Russian colonialism in Siberia, right? So you're absolutely correct there. The liberals in their complex of empire, I absolutely did destroy just to impose upon them their thoughts of civilization.
I have my one final point I want to make here as we go on, and then we'll, if you guys don't mind, we can continue the conversation. But I have another quote. It comes from a German magazine in the 1920s, but I kind of adopted it as a personal model and changed Germany to America. There is no American nation. There is no American government. There is no American representation. There is only a colony of the globalists. We are natives of a colony. That's the entire cruel and unrelenting truth, which one must make peace with mentally before thinking ahead. And what this means to me, and my conception of the Patriotic Socialist Front, is what we call America right now, and the West in general. America used to be a nation. We had a national identity. We were a people. Today, we're a bunch of squabbling tribes. We've been reduced by liberalism and consumerism to, an economic
Drones,
marketplace with a military.
drones.
We are
Just
Walmart and McDonald's with a military, and we're ruled by cosmopolitan, rootless international bankers who go around the
with
world imposing their will.
institutionalized and legal corruption. Absolutely, you're
Absolutely.
not wrong whatsoever.
And
The
so what I'm
the
saying is
West
trying to defend this
currently,
power structure or trying to, in any way, shape, or form, keep these parasites in power, you are only hurting yourself and your own people.
I
This
don't disagree
parasite
That's
is
why I
on
think
whatsoever.
we
our
should be
nation. It
talk.
has to
That's
be
why I think we should be
removed
talking about
root
Ukraine.
and
Actually,
stem. The
yeah. So
entire
why don't we? Yeah,
structure
we
must be
could shift.
destroyed.
We could shift to Ukraine if you guys
I
want to get
don't.
into if you
I
guys
don't
want to get into
disagree,
meat and
Andrew,
potatoes real early.
about the content of your opposition to liberalism. It's absolutely correct. The West as a whole has been commercialized. It's been turned into a series of numbers. Everything is the same to be sold the same. Culture, identity, it's all sold by the consumerist controllers, right? By the globalist, by the banker, by the corporation, right? That's what it's sold by, it's what it's controlled by. That's absolutely correct. There's no opposition on our part about that. That is a fact, and we've wrote about it before in our articles on our website. But our view on it is that the West itself isn't the poison. Right, the West has been the originator, the birther of these amazing and beautiful ideas, such as fascism, such as futurism, such as all these other grandiose concepts. Right, this is
Yeah.
the birthplace of them, and that's why we
If
defend
But
I
it.
you're
can,
Because we don't defend the
if I can
West.
interject,
conflating the West with liberalism. They're
if, if,
the West, in quotes, is an idea. If you go look up what is Western culture on Wikipedia or whatever, something stupid like that, what's going to come up is liberalism.
that's
So
In a modern day, in a
because
modern
Western
day,
civilization. It's because Western civilization is liberalism.
I don't believe so. If you go back,
Real European identity is medieval in its consciousness, and it is more
I
similar to the
I would
East.
honestly, I would honestly, I wanna butt in and say something particularly about just the way that the West works and the way that power is organized. From the very beginning, it's always been a select, typically group of families, wealthy families, or influential groups or cliques that are typically holding a lot of the political power at the top, even in societies that are supposed to be supposedly democratic. Sorry, you can look at ancient Rome during the Republican era, where in theory, yeah, it was a republic where citizens elected their representatives, but in actuality, most of the political power was held by the Optimates faction, who was composed of mostly old, rich, bureaucratic families that lived in the city of Rome. In the United States, it's not much different. We have a large group of coastal elites, Silicon Valley, typical capitalist industrial types, and these people use their money and influence through the system of lobbying, which is another thing that I guess we could talk about if we want to.
institutionalized corruption.
Yeah, it's institutionalized corruption. It's legal corruption. It's essentially an avenue that allows for you to put money into politics. And once money is in politics, which is what the system of liberalism inherently enables, it allows for one man's individual liberty to trump another's. As soon as that happens, the entire system is rotten.
Exactly. I think if we go back to the 1930s here for a second, Andrew, your point about how the people see like the West, right? The concept of the West. If you, as you said, if you like went on Wikipedia and you looked at the West, right? If we go back and we look at an example taken from Anti Europa, which was a newspaper run by the Committee of the University Committee of Action for the University of Rome under the auspices of the Montreux Conference and the authority of Benito Mussolini, right? It had a German author by the name of Anton Hilkman, right, who wrote a fantastic article in 1931 called "Is National Socialism a Danger to Western Civilization?" Now, I won't get into the part about National Socialism; it's not important, right? Not to this discussion right now. But when we get to the core of his article, he describes fascism, right, as the guardian and inheritor of all the West is supposed to be, right? All that the West was. It's what it is, what it should be. It is all what it was, right? So that's the lens that we view this the conglomeration of the West from. We don't see it. We don't support like maintaining or just reforming the West. We want a revolution, right? We want a Robespierre for America, right? For
A
the whole
cultural
West,
revolution at that.
right?
And
A
a lot of
massive
people,
revolution that totally resets what the concept of the West is back to what it should have been, right? What Anton Hilkman, what Anti Europa, what the whole CAUR wanted the West to be seen as, and what it should be seen as, right? Which is the bearer of a very bright torch. Of a philosophy of selfless anti-consumerism, of anti-materialism, right? Of heroic men and heroic ideas, beautiful ideas worth dying for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that.
So I want to say something, Andrew.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so like my issue with the West is that I don't really see it as a continuation of European culture, but a replacement. To me, it seems like European identity was hijacked, and the spirit which haunts modern Europe is anti-European, because like real Europe was Christian and it was Gothic, and with its traditional spirit was very much rooted in old Greek philosophy, especially with things like Platonism. But if we look at the modern West, or what is Western civilization, has always been synonymous with liberal, bourgeois, and degenerative, politically correct ideas. And the people that are screaming about losing their culture and identity currently are just nothing more than part of this liberal power structures. They're just
No,
angry
I
they're losing
absolutely
their own
agree with
power.
that point.
yeah,
They
yeah,
they,
we
they want to
agree
return
somewhat.
to a white picket fence of liberalism, right? Of liberalism 50 years ago.
But
I
They don't
mean,
see
even
that
you
as
talk
But
as
to
the
I
you
do have
talk
to
issue.
to
say something else really fast. The
Okay, go ahead.
issue with fascism, just like with like classical Marxism, is that it focuses on man as the main subject and deifies man, which is more where my religious views come in. So it is this humanistic philosophy, which is basically, as I see it, is a spirit of the Antichrist, which is what manifests within Western civilization as a aspect of the Antichrist. I think Andrew would probably slightly disagree, but the only way you can fight that is with something like revolutionary radical traditionalism, with like Julius Evola formulated, or some of the National Bolshevik thinkers, which was the only way to counter fascism, which has sided with liberalism, along with Nazism, which has sided with liberalism.
I'd like to
I
we
point
would
out
feel
too
disagree.
that
We would disagree that
the
we
very
haven't
Well,
sided
first.
with
if we look at Western civilization, where's fascism coming from now? It's coming from the Republican and the Democrat Party.
I don't think so. I don't think
I don't
fascism's
think so.
coming from either
It
of these
is like
parties.
I
I
it
mean,
don't
is
see it at
though.
all. What I see is encroaching populism, which is common amongst dying republics and dying democracies.
It's a
Like
society
if we
where
go back,
people
let's
are.
go back to the historical record. Let's go back to ancient Athens, right? The birthplace of democracies. Where did it die? Where did democracy die? It died with a populace, Pericles, right? Who roused up the people against the status quo and whatnot in the swamp, right? Pericles is where democracy died in Athens, right? So like this isn't fascism. This is just populism, which is innate to any democratic system in the late stages of it. But I want to respond to Zoltanis' point on the West being hijacked. I don't agree. I agree with Maximilian Robespierre's stance. I believe that the French Revolution was beautiful. That its construct was all-reaching. Even though it spawned every modern political ideology, other than, of course, National Bolshevism, I would assume, since you referenced or like Evolian revolutionary traditionalism, right? It spawned the rest, though. It spawned liberalism,
Yeah,
fascism, communism. It
we're
spawned
not
all
trying
of
to
that, right?
use a futuristic iconoclasm, which is just like another variation of liberalism. It's going to
I don't
pre-liberalism
agree. That's
itself.
another version of liberalism. I feel that it is innately the core of a free human spirit to destroy any kind of this connection to the past, this traditionalism that has long time dragged down nations like China and Russia into quagmires of being unimportant countries for hundreds of years. They're only recovering now after.
We
Hold
worship.
on, hold on, Liz. Let me finish my point, please. Right? Then I'll let you rebuttal.
Okay.
So it dragged down these countries like Russia with its czardom and its traditions until Lenin threw them out, until Lenin burned them down. Russia was a backwater who couldn't even defend itself from a nation fighting a three-front war. Right? It couldn't do it. China, which was ransacked by the West, all sorts of the West, the Portuguese, the French, the English, they ransacked China. They split it up into a bunch of minuscule states. and they turned it into this feuding warlord shithole until Mao adopted a Western philosophy and then applied a peasantry touch to it. The same way had the KMT one would have employed the Hegelian dialectic that the blue shirts, the majority officer cadre and clique of the KMT was adopting, would have adopted that Hegelian fascist style and would have done the exact same thing, and that was destroy everything that old China and old Russia had to make it new and to make it function. Because these traditions, they act like a suck to the soul, like a great sucking sound, as Ross Perot would have said it in the '90s, right? That just draws it all in and sinks these nations in a bog where they'll never escape from until it's burned. That is what tradition does. Now you may rebuttal.
You want to go, or you want me to?
Yeah, sorry, my mic. Yeah, I have a counter. It's from Akura Kazuzo. So he basically says that the unique blessing of unbroken sovereignty, the proud self-reliance of an unconquered race and the insular isolation, which protected ancestral ideas and instincts at the cost of expansion, made Japan the real repository of the trust of Asiatic thought and culture. Thus, Japan is a museum of Asiatic civilization, and yet more than a museum, because the singular genie of the race leads to the dwell on the phase of the ideas of the past, in the spirit of a living advantism, which welcomes the new form without losing the old essence. So if we relate that to like Evolian philosophy, you can have a radical traditionalism, and it is able to address and progress itself to function within the modern age. Now, if we look at the type of modernism that like futurism itself advocated for, it wasn't about preserving these old essences. It was literally completely upturning everything within the society itself, like abolishing the family, libertarianism, allowing homosexuality, which were completely destructive liberal forces themselves, which came out as an expansion of the Enlightenment, which itself was a mistake.
Homosexuality predates the Enlightenment by a far distance. If you're familiar with ancient Rome and ancient Greece, you would know that homosexuality was...
Yeah, I know. Mannerboon stuff, but it's still
well, not
wrong.
just Mannerboon stuff. If we look at the
Are you a Christian?
Record, am I a Christian? Yes, I am.
Okay, so why are you arguing for sodomy then?
Why am I arguing for sodomy? Because I don't feel that it is such an important... I don't think we should impose that kind of hardcore view that, you know, the gays are the enemy or whatever. That's just nonsense. It's a curation of... it's hard to describe at this moment. It's not coming to mind. But like it's like you're engaging in an action against a population that will inevitably, to some extent, always exist. Right?
We don't interject real quick on the grounds
go ahead, Octavian.
Can I? Yeah, because what religion was brought up. So, I mean, I'm a Christian, right? And, you know, am I in personal support of homosexuality? No, right? But I don't believe that it is necessarily my right, or that God would be necessarily okay if I casted judgment on an entire group of people based on their sin. Are they sinners? Sure. Do I like it? No. But
then again, as it was said, all men sin, right? It's an inevitable fact that all men sin.
Yeah, all men sin, but it's still an abomination in God's eyes. That's that's a weird stance.
Are we at the homosexuality point?
Yes, we are at the moment.
We're a bit off track on what we wanted to get to, but yeah, we've somehow got around to homosexuality.
Basically, my key point on that, I just want to, you know, address the tweet I saw, or tweet or something.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Also, Greeks hated gays too. If you look into that.
Well, that depends on which Greek state you're in. In Thebes, it was openly promoted. The Theban sacred band were all gay. For example, they were selected between the gay lovers because they thought if one of them died, the other would fight even harder.
So
it was just a weird ancient conundrum.
The homosexual stuff in ancient Greece has been debunked as of recent.
Debunked? No, because I've read some recent books from last year.
I would
a lot of it's only promoted by queer theorists.
It's mostly
I don't agree with that necessarily either. Although queer theorists and gay activists really have adopted a weird stance about how everybody in the ancient world was gay. That's not true either.
Yeah,
neither extreme is correct. The reality is that homosexualism existed, right? And generally speaking, in most areas, it wasn't hated. There was distaste for it in some areas. There was support for it in others, like in Thebes, right? But as an overarching concept of minority sexualities, right? They just, it wasn't like a major issue. And it wouldn't become a major issue until the entry of the Ascendant Church, right? When the church founded itself in Rome. That's when the problem of homosexuality became something that was politically integrated. Like, for example,
Okay,
if you want to first, just before we go on, Andrew, right? If you want a first-hand source, there's a book by Ovidius or something like that from 2 AD, one of the best-selling books in ancient Rome, right? I was talking with Octavian about it the other day, yeah, where not only does it support rape in force in a relationship, right? It also supports homosexual love, right? It's a weird book for sure, but it was the best-selling book in ancient Rome at that time, around 2 AD.
And the guy that wrote it, like, just an anecdote, apparently bagged Augustus's daughter or granddaughter. So
Yeah,
clearly
and then
he
was
was
exiled.
Clearly he knew something.
It was an interesting guy. But now go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, so I don't necessarily personally want to get into the morality of it one way or another, but I want to make clear that the National Bolshevik position is that the state should be involved in everything. I'm going to bring out another quote from Karl Otto Pytel, and he said in the National Bolshevik Manifesto, "We commit ourselves to the nation. It is our last political value as a fateful expression of Volkish community. We commit ourselves to the Volk as the natural, ethnic, cultural community in contrast to ethnically destructive Western civilization. We commit ourselves to the intrinsic meaning of German folkdom, and we commit ourselves to a socialist planned economy, which, after breaking the capitalist order, binds Volk and nation into an organic structure, and a social economy constitutes the foundation of state sovereignty." So basically, what we're talking about here as National Bolsheviks, we want a complete rebirth of the American nation where the state becomes an organic thing. The state is your family. The state is the economy. The state is your military. And you yourself get to feel as part of this bigger thing. Like it's something that Vola said. Well, I believe he actually stole it from Nietzsche, but Nietzsche had said that God, the concept of God and being part of this, religious community, it allowed for the alienation of the I. So like the ability to escape yourself and become part of something bigger, to give meaning to your life, basically. So where I disagree with what the National Fascist Party put out in their tweet about the state has no business regulating how the family structure works or something along those lines, I agree and totally disagree. The state should have control of everything. And
Okay,
that's why I put that.
That's an interesting point to make. So the point of the tweet that you're referring to was twofold, right? First of all, we wanted to note that we don't hate homosexuals, which was the question asked by the guy who had initially tweeted at us. I think his name was like Stone or something like that, who asked a question about if we hated
it was not,
gays.
And by the way, just butting in real quick as the chairman of the party, right? It wasn't, do you support the drag queens in front of kids or the fucking pride parades with half naked people? No, obviously we don't fucking support that. Obviously there's a line drawn for us. It's just that we're not going to persecute people for being homosexuals. That was
right?
The point.
And moving on, you make an interesting point about the state being organic, the state being total, right? Totalitarianism. Except, I feel that the National Bolshevik totalitarianism has gone down the route that fascist totalitarianism never intended for the word to mean, right? If you from research within the foundational doctrines, like the fascist doctrine and what is fascism by Gentile, right? You find that he describes it as the super democracy, right? The total democracy, the pure democracy, for a reason, because the totalitarian aspect has been, like, by liberal propaganda, has made it mean like Big Brother, kind of 1984, over your shoulder all the time.
It's
in
very
every part of
based.
life.
Very based.
Like George Orwell and his consequences on modern politics will forever be there, right?
Based
But
Orwell.
totalitarianism wasn't supposed to mean that. Gentile, and to some extent Benito Mussolini. Although we know that
We could just
didn't
deport
actually
all
write
of them
the
to
document.
Hawaii, bro.
When they wrote this, they stated that very intently that the citizen is the state, right? The state is everything because the citizen is the state, and there's no separation between the term state and citizen. And an action against the citizen is thus an action against the state, and the action of the citizen against the state is an action against himself, right?
It's not
So
totalitarian in its method. It's totalitarian in its scale and composition.
exactly, in its thought, right? It wants the people to voluntarily subject themselves as individuals to the mass. In fact, Mussolini, in the same speech to the 1933 to the corporations, where he calls liberalism a tumor and a disease, right, a malignant disease, he also refers to the issue of serialization, where liberalism wants everybody to be the same because it's easier to monetize them, right? And how the state communism, state socialism, as seen in the Soviet Union, had done the same thing, right? It had turned everybody into numbers, easily controlled and corralled, right? They are totalitarian in the modern liberal propaganda sense, like George Orwell wanted, in the complete different way to how fascism is totalitarian, right?
Well, I can think of something funny is that we're talking about like the fascist totalitarianism there, and then how you can't really take these actions against the citizen. It makes me think of like when Gentile went and complained about the fascists killing partisans, like
Yeah,
Antifa,
and
and then the
then
Antifa came out and killed Gentile
yeah, I know.
because he was a naive idiot.
Well, you call him a naive idiot, but he was an idealist. That was his whole point.
He was
Yeah, and it didn't manifest in reality, which is why the philosophy of the PSF is Platonism.
Well, you can hate him for being a very fair and kind person. But
Yeah,
I find that
he
is kind of like
he died because he was naive. If you allow these people in society, they are going to manifest their culture and ideas into society because it is inherently subversive.
What was right by the state, right? The morality guided by state rather than by personal opinion. Gentile lived by his standards and thus died by his standards. That is,
he didn't have a real morality because it was a subjective morality. It was the deification of man, whereas morality can only come from a god, which is why his philosophy. That's why his philosophy is condemned as heretical by the Catholic Church.
Cool. I don't care about the Catholic Church.
Yeah, don't. Right? Well, you're not a Christian, so
the Gentile being heretical or whatever doesn't matter. The morality from him and for fascism as a whole is derived from the state, right? The state gives meaning to morality; it gives meaning to that. So there's no need to rely upon gods or upon laws to give you your sense of morality. We're not a legalist. We're not a theologist, moralist, right? What's it called? A deist, right? No, the base of morality comes from what is right for the state, what is right by the state, versus what is against the state, what is wrong for the state, right? And what is improper for the state.
But you're talking about ethical, which ethical politics or the interpretation of morality from a secular standpoint is how things happen in the temporal world. We're talking about in the transcendental and the spiritual world, which is something moral can only come from God. When man interprets something that is moral is ethical, which is why Gentile's state is only ethical. It is not a moral state.
I don't agree. Morality doesn't only come from God. That is...
Everything political is ethical. That's why everything political is Machiavellian and is a power play.
I don't think
that's why politics.
Not everything.
Yes,
not
everything political is Machiavellian.
No, not everything is done for the pure sense of achieving one's own goals. Right? There is altruism.
You have power. You have powered interest and class interests within those Machiavellian strategies.
Can I ask a question? If you're doing this for yourself, and you're not doing this for other people, then why are you a patriotic socialist? Well, so socialism
because there is a class interest and there's a power interest there because of that class interest.
So you're combining your own.
We promote class war.
Right?
Absolutely.
Am I understanding it correctly that you're combining your own interest with class? I just want to.
Well, my ethical interest, our ethical interest is in class war for that reason.
Okay, I see.
But okay, go ahead, Andrew. It's okay. Go ahead.
You had mentioned before about fascism and the individual, and I'd like to contrast that with National Bolshevism, and the basis of National Bolshevism was more or less Spengler. And
Oswald Spengler. Okay.
Yeah, Spengler. He wrote in Prussian Socialism. This is his book after Decline of the West. This conception of Prussian society and this idea where citizens do not have rights, they have duties. So this idea of fascism, working
Well,
with
I
the individual.
never mentioned rights. Individualism isn't a right. Okay, the individual exists innately as something that just exists. There is no right to it, right? The individual has a duty to the state in fascism, right? But he has the right, the quote unquote rights, right, are not given by any kind of extreme being, right? There's no basis for rights. I agree with that stance entirely. The citizen and the individual in and of himself exists from day one of being born, right? He's an individual, and from that day on, he curates his own
Humans are social
perspective.
animals.
Yeah, exactly. A social animal. He curates his own individualism, right? He is his own person. He has his own wants, his own needs, his own interests, his own beliefs. They can be shaped by the world around him, nurture, right? But they exist innately. Everybody begins as an individual. Liberalism and to some degree state communism wants to eliminate that. It wants to eliminate the individual aspect of a person to make them more agreeable to a collective. Fascism, on the other hand, sees it as the individual can become the collective just as easily.
How could you? I'm boggled because
We look at it as a
liberalism
form of assimilation or sublation. But I'll let Andrew
liberalism
continue.
is, in its nature, it is about minimum restrictions on the individual. That's why it dissolves society, it dissolves culture, it dissolves everything that puts limitations on behavior. That's what liberalism is.
And
how could
I
it
mentioned
erase
this
man?
earlier. I mentioned this earlier, quoting Mussolini in his speech to the corporations, right? That the liberalism and its control of individualism comes from the fact that it wants everybody to be serialized, so that the corporations can have easier control over people, right? The state and everything, the country, the nation, the government, they don't matter to the individual as he is being developed. The corporation wants everybody to want the same things because it's cheaper that way. It's easier to control.
Yeah, but that's the
consumer.
corporation. That's not the.
Yeah,
the
that's what I'm referring to in liberalism.
liberalism.
Liberalism is made up of the corporations that rule those countries, of the bankers, the corporate CEOs.
Inevitably, the power is not even really in the hands of the politician. It's
in the hands of the market, right? And the market wants you to be the same as your neighbor, so that he can sell you the same thing as your neighbor.
Yeah, okay, that's fair right there, but
that's what I'm getting at. That's how liberalism kills the individual, because he makes him yet another product consumer. It's easier when everybody wants to consume the same things. Everybody wants to hop on the same trend, because then what's being made can just continue to be made, and the company can keep making the profit. State communism is completely different.
Bring this back up when we get to race realism, because I would say the reason for this.
I kind of want to talk Ukraine, bro.
Okay, we can go on, but I just want to remind me when we get there, because I would say the reason for this is tabula rasa, blank slate theory, and when we get to race realism, remind me to bring up blank slate theory.
If we're going to move on to another topic, can I suggest like a short recess, get water, compare notes, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Dark, can we set a timer for like I don't know, 5 minutes or something?
Sure, that's fine by me. All right.
I've been waiting.
I just want to say before we begin this, I want to say, like, before we start this recess, it's actually been like very much a pleasure talking to you, Andrew. It's been very informative.
I think that a lot of the stuff, a lot of the discourse that happens on in these spaces, particularly coming from our end, probably because there's so many Zoomers among us, there's a lot of shit posting and irony and just intentionally pulling someone's leg. But it is nice to actually sit down and have a coordinated conversation and lay out what the other party believes and see where we find common ground, see where we don't, that sort of thing.
Hey, Andrew.
Yeah, what up, brother?
Z.
All right, so you can start that timer now, Dark.
All right.
Jesus, greed. Your comment is cancer. I hate you.
Where is it?
And that's why.
Oh, Seamus, I don't have mod.
Zoltanus, were you ever familiar with the Remusite Liberalisti? Do you know what that was?
The what?
The Remusite Liberalisti.
I'm gonna grab some tea.
No.
I'll be right back.
Never heard of it.
All right, go
It was
to
like a fucking shitpost circle where
Hold on. Yeah, Dark. You don't need mod. I was just saying like set a timer so that we know like how long it's been and whatnot.
I've got a clock.
Oh yeah. All right, thanks.
The Remo sites were a funny group of shit posters who really hated what we were doing.
It's over for Seamus and it's over for Ukraine.
All right, so yeah, that 5-minute timer. Thanks, boys.
Yo, this one dude who made like a hate channel of me when he assumed you guys were my group and then
we saw that. That was funny.
We thought that was funny. Yeah.
No, I literally talked with that dude and told him no, I'm not in that group, and he kept making posts about me being in that group, and then I was like, dude, like you do realize they're pro-Ukraine? I'm very vocally pro-Russia, and then that dude who was bitching about me was pro-Ukraine. Then when he found out, he got very angry that you guys were pro-Ukraine because he was like, how are they pro-Ukraine when they have such a dumb political stance? And it's like, okay.
I mean, we can have an actual discussion about Ukraine, but like, you know, I wouldn't necessarily describe us as pro or anti. I mean,
well, it was one of those Spurg like Azov like pagan Nazi accounts.
Yeah, our belief is like that. Honestly, our primacy of focus should be in the United States, right? So we would honestly prefer if the United States was not involved in that situation at all. I mean, do I want Ukraine to win because that's where Seamus is and he's my friend and he's fighting? Yeah, but I also don't really care about the politics of it. Like, I just could not care less.
Oh, the reason why white nationalists hate me so much is because I hate Azov.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, white nationalists tend to hate everybody. I mean, like, I've been reading the comments, and it's like, you know, we literally said that, you know, we're against the globo homo, I guess, kind of homosexuality. That we just didn't want to kill gay.
White nationalists when they see me in public.
Oh yeah.
Black Waffen.
Yeah.
It's also amusing to me that like there's a sizable number of people who identify themselves as fascists but don't really seem to.
Jay Leno. Lol.
You guys remember Confederati? That was funny. Good time.
Good times indeed.
It's not progressive fascism. It's just fascism, dude. It's what it is. It's fascism as it is. Like I don't know what else.
Kind of like old school fascism's kind of like Haas's like libertarian Marxism Leninism meme. Libertarian fascism.
There's a side. This is kind of the disconnect. There's a lot of people who are drawn to fascism because they think it's like hyper traditional, and then they find out about the futurists, and then suddenly it's not so cool anymore. So, you know, there's a lot of people whose conception of fascism is a liberal or Marxist conception, and then they identify with that conception not because they genuinely care about it, but I assume because they think it's cool and edgy. That's really the only logical reason I can come up with.
Yeah, it's disillusioned young men, right, who get into that.
They just want a place to belong.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, to be honest, that's why I'm into fascism. You know, a place to belong mostly.
You went down the decent route. You know, you didn't go down the ultra, you know, base Chad, Wignat, child porn posting, fucking retard.
Okay, child porn disgusting, but
it is, but it wasn't disgusting to the Wignats who raided our chat.
I've been spammed with that like a million times.
I remember you spoke.
That's so fucking disgusting.
Yeah, you mean you're talking about the first meltdown message? I was like,
yeah.
That was me complaining about the CP, the black porn, the tranny porn, and the gore.
Yeah, they tried to spam that in our chats. It was quite disgusting to see what they were trying to do. And then they leveled the accusation that we were pedophiles as well, which is just fucking inane since they were posting child porn in our chats.
Yeah, but Seamus, to be honest though, I did kind of fall into the NASOC, you know, rabbit hole before I really.
Black Nazi, really?
You remind
Yeah.
me of that guy, Lord Dust. You ever see that video of the taxi driver? Who's
I
like,
swear to God, he's not even black. He's not even black. He's Indian.
This guy's fucking funny, dude. He's like, I'm a
He is.
national socialist.
He is pretty funny, but yeah.
Maybe they have more in
Interview
common with
goes-
ANCAPs than we realized.
the guy
Honestly,
interviewed
I
himself.
wouldn't. I would completely agree with that. Like that's not wrong at all. Because they're just disgusting people. I mean, they're just fucking horrific.
But yeah, for a
Like, I
while,
completely understand, Zolt, why you had that meltdown. Like why you started like screaming on video and everything. I completely understand that. Like it makes perfect sense to me. It pissed me off a lot to see that there was child porn being posted and accusations of pedophilia and whatnot. It was disgusting.
Yeah, a lot of
And
people don't get
personally,
it.
I
A
can't
lot of people
imagine.
don't get it till it happens to them, and then when they tell me it happens, I kind of laugh about
I
it.
understood it. I understood even when like I first saw it, even before they were posting child porn. Like that kind of behavior is just disgusting.
it
Like, it's
really
one
is
thing to raid a
disgusting.
server. It's one thing to raid a server and like scream like I don't know Nazi slogans at a server or whatever. It's completely another thing to go in there and post child porn.
Yeah, it's
or
part of the
disgusting
reason. It was like part of the reason why, like earlier in the debate, I was saying that fascism's coming out of the mainstream liberal power structure because, like, when we look at a lot of the people being propped up, like Maloney or some of these like neo-fascist parties, vaguely speaking, in Europe, or even like the neo-Nazi groups, a lot of them are connected in some way to like NATO, the CIA, or the FBI. Even if like there's a group that isn't, they're like the minority.
I'm back, by the way.
I feel
Alright.
that's more liberal support for fascism as an alternative to communism or other.
Well, a lot of it comes from Kalergi because like Kalergiites basically wanted to create like a pan-united European like super state that was anti-Russia and anti-American, and he wanted to model it after the Italian fascist model. And then he was also friends with Engelbert Dollfuss, and he had connections to Evola. But once Hitler started getting more power and influence, he actually left Europe and started working with America, which is why he became more prominent in the post-war and set up the EU. But essentially, he came to the idea that like a hegemonic liberalism was the best way to combat communism, and then you could use fascism then you could use fascism and Nazis as like a defensive militia measure to fight them.
Yeah, I remember that. That was like part of Operation Gladio as the concept and everything, right? Was preparing fascism to fight communism.
Yeah, and that's why, like in my article on Kalergi, I say that modern Azov supporters or like anybody
Azov
who's
isn't
like
fascist. Even at its like peak of being like I don't know, Nazi LARPers or whatever, like the social nationalists when they founded it, they didn't really have any concise idea of what the fuck.
Oh, I'm just saying in general. I'm just saying in general. These nationalist groups were basically like used as a defense mechanism.
Yeah. To some degree, that's always going to happen, though, right? Because they prioritize the defense of what they see as important in their country over any kind of real, I guess you could call it like pragmatism and ideology.
Dude, like it's even went past like pragmatism and ideology. It's kind of just like when you talk with them, it's just kind of like I hate Russians, and like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they were.
I've had long discussions with some dudes from fucking Patriotic sector.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if they're like from the ones I've talked to. It doesn't matter if they're Bolsheviks, if they have a czar, or even if there was like a Russian fascist or a Russian Nazi in charge of Russia.
I hate Russia.
I
hate Russia.
Yeah. Is the break done now?
I just don't.
I
guess so. It's been like 10 minutes.
All right, sweet.
I just like.
Yeah.
We could
Let's
talk
talk
about
geopolitics
Ukraine if you guys want to. Geopolitics in general, I guess, but we can start with Ukraine. I don't care.
Sure, it doesn't matter to me.
All right, so Seamus, lay out the case as to why Ukraine.
Why Ukraine? Well,
where you stand on Ukraine and why.
There you go.
But like, why Ukraine is an interesting conundrum, right? First and foremost, there is some romantic and sentimental value I view in my personal favoring of the Ukraine. Defense of small nations and whatnot has been a very Irish trait for hundreds of years, irregardless of ideology or anything like that. That's like the sentimentalist. But for more geopolitical standard, right, is that the Ukraine is sort of like it's sort of like Israel in a way, right? And hold on until I get to the meat of this is that Israel, right, will adopt any ideology out of pragmatism that the United States does, right? Because it wants to be defended at all costs, right? It wants to have the backing of the West. It wants to be a part of the West. So the Israelis, if you really want to get into the hard knock of it, the foundations of the Israeli country as like an idea and as a real foundation come from Israeli fascists.
The chat right now.
I know.
Yeah, the
the
chat's
Brit
insane.
the Brit Habone and the revisionist
Hold on.
Maximilianist Zionists, right? They were fascists. They were openly so, and they supported Mussolini. Their members went to Italy and joined the party at points. And then when they went to Israel, they tried to found a country, right? And the
New
Leahy sprung from
Arditi
them at
says
one
nuke
point.
Israel.
Nuke Israel.
Yeah.
But so in the pragmatist sense of modern day Israel, right? Israel will adopt any ideology it thinks America is going to adopt. To be pragmatist, right? You can love Israel, you can hate Israel. It doesn't really matter. That's how Israel is, right? The Ukraine is similar in a way because after it split from the Soviet Union, the Ukraine didn't get into NATO like Poland did, right? So now it was on its own, and it needed somewhere to lean back on. And the easiest one to lean back on was the natural enemy of the East, right, of Russia, and that is America. So leaning back on America was just the obvious uh, tactic of a Ukrainian nationalist or any kind of somebody who like actually cares for the nation of Ukraine. In that same vein, if the West is able to be fascistized, then the Ukraine is going to fascistize with it to match with it to keep up the support. So just it's basically very pragmatist geopolitics. Is that you're supporting the enemy of your enemy, right? I couldn't care less about the ideologies of Ukraine or Russia. Both of them are liberal, right? Russia's liberalism is different, for sure, from the West. It's its own unique Eastern form of liberalism, but it is still liberalism. Oligarchs still run everything. Putin has power, yes, but he is constrained by the richest other 100 men of Russia who own things like Gazprom and, fucking all those other places, right? So when you look at it from that macro perspective, it is two ideologically similar countries fighting over some really stupid fucking border dispute and like ethnic dispute over an extreme minority of the Ukraine to, I don't know, fundamentalize their own power, right?
So
the host died.
Real quick.
Can I?
Yeah, we'll get him back. Don't worry.
I have a little bit different of an opinion.
Okay,
so I honestly, the party policy of the NFP is that we simply just don't believe that America should be involved in any foreign conflicts, right? Seamus's feelings about Ukraine, as he said, largely come from his personal sentiments about what he thinks would be useful for the West in the long term and the romanticism of the defense of a small country. I'm a man of practicality, right? I simply believe that it is in the West's best interest, specifically America's best interest, because that's really what we're talking about is America. America's best interest is to focus on itself, to get its economy back on its feet, to get all of the people who are currently living in poverty and going hungry, get some help for those people. Like our focus should be on ourselves and on improving ourselves. I'm in the same boat as Seamus in that I don't really care about the ideology necessarily of Russia or Ukraine. It doesn't really matter to me who necessarily wins. Seamus is my friend, and so, I would hope that if they don't win, he at least survives. But beyond that, I don't really have very many strong feelings.
I'll let Andrew handle all the geopolitical stuff.
Go ahead.
Are you finished, Octavian?
Yeah, I'm finished. Go ahead, man.
My first point is going to address the kind of historical situation that you had just mentioned, that Poland joined NATO and Ukraine did not. There's reason for this. Ukraine and Russia, until very recently, were close. The largest immigrant group of, the largest population of people from outside of Russia living in Russia has traditionally, until just very recently, been Ukrainians. And I'm talking about all the way through the 2000s. There's been tons of Ukrainian immigration to Russia. And since independence, Ukraine has been ruled by legitimately elected pro-Russian governments. This was changed in 2014 by a situation called Maidan, where
Yeah, I remember
a
the Maiden revolts.
woman named Victoria Nuland, who happens to share an ethnic background with Israelis, helped NATO and CIA-funded neo-Nazis overthrow the legitimate election, the legitimately elected government.
I wouldn't describe the Bandierites
let me
as
take
Nazis. I just want to interject to say I wouldn't describe the Bandierites as Nazis. That's all.
I would. They're all neo-Nazis to me. That's what this stuff is. In my opinion, I call it all Nazis. So these Jewish Nazis overthrew the legitimately elected government of Ukraine and began ethnically cleansing half of their population. So, as you said, the ideologies don't matter, but what does matter is the symbology of it. This is a nation that is being ran as a money laundering scheme for American elites who share an ethnic background, both with Israel and with the government of Ukraine. And through this ethnic background, they are laundering money and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So my enemy, the United States government and the great global American empire of, globalized homosexual liberalism, considers Ukraine important because it's their line in the ground. We're going to take from Russia. We're going to take from the Sino friendship, this great Eurasian space that was being built. So the defeat of Ukraine is what's important for the American people because it signals to the rest of the world that our oppressors who run this empire are not invincible.
May I push back on something real quick?
Yes, of course, my friend.
Just out of, I would feel reprieved if I didn't. So there's a lot of people in the comments right now who are saying, why not just say Jews? And I guess I kind of also want to push on that because it's when you're mentioning that certain individuals involved happen to be Jewish, even if it's true.
Well, it's a very strong influence of Israelis and Azov and Ukraine.
Dudes, we're on YouTube.
We don't even have to talk no, we're not even talking like.
I'm not gonna get this guy's.
We're not even talking about Nazi anti-Semitism.
More dark channel here, right? I understood when Andrew was doing.
Yes, please.
It was to reprieve Dark from any kind of content strike over this, right?
Oh yeah.
So I'll respond to that, Andrew. From being here, being around these guys, you called the Bandierites Nazis, so I want to touch on that first. In your opinion, you're fine to have that opinion if you want, right? I can't force anybody to have a different opinion, right? But from talking with these guys, being around them, they're not Nazis, in my opinion, in any way whatsoever. Even in the most like modern day liberal kind of sense of Nazism, they're not. Some of them, I would wager, a lot of the new guys, especially, aren't even fascists, right? The core old members definitely were, still are. But most of them are just your average Ukrainian nationalist. I wouldn't describe them as very political in any direction, right? They don't like the status quo, they don't like Russia, and they don't like the West very much. But the leadership of the Patriotic sector of the OUNB or the Bandeirites, right? They see that the West is going to be their friend by choice, not by, any other stretch of the thing.
Except they couped the government. It was by force.
Yeah, they did. They did coup the government. The right sector did. They're the ones. It wasn't the CIA plants or whatever that Russian conspiracy theorists pointed to in the Maiden. It was right sector men who shot those 3 people, and they admitted to it. They shot 3 people and blamed the police.
The prime minister that took over after was literally appointed by the U.S.
It doesn't matter if he was appointed by the U.S. or whatnot. The right sector didn't choose who succeeded the government, all right? They couped the original government and put it up to the people in the Maiden Square to pick the next to that, all right? And naturally, the leader of the legislature just took over. I mean, that's just step
right.
one.
Yulia Tymoshenko, whose maiden name for everybody out there to
okay. We don't need to care about the ethnicity background of the person.
Her maiden name is Capital Man, just so everybody knows. That's her maiden name, Yulia Tymoshenko.
The people who initiated the coup weren't CIA plants or CIA funded. They weren't, right? Now, you can say whatever you want about the aftermath of the coup. I don't know a terrible amount about Ukrainian politics of what happened after in depth. I know the basics. I've been told the basics, but I don't know the in depth, right? All I know is that the right sector did the coup. They were fighting on the streets of Kiev before the Maidan Revolt, right? And then the Maidan Revolt happened. And it wasn't even a revolt, really. It was a protest against not allowing, like, the EU not accepting them. And then the right sector saw that there was a chance to initiate a radical shift of politics, right? And they shot people and blamed the cops, and that worked. Now, you can say whatever you want, but the changing of the direction of Ukraine for its geopolitical opinion is just geopolitics. Russia would have just as eagerly did it if it had been a Ukrainian pro-American or pro-Western leader from 1992 to 2014, and people were protesting. Russia would have urged its supporters to do the same thing. That's just a fact, right? They would have. And America, it shot in as quickly as it could anyway. It was going to happen, no matter what.
The reality is that Ukraine is a very unstable nation and has been since independence.
And Russia is no better than America in its direction. It just, like I've explained many times to some of the people who listen to me more often, right? Like in our chats and whatnot, is that Russia is America, but 50 or 60 years behind socially. Right? There's no economic difference in Russia between Russia and America. It was McDonald's, whatever the fuck is the local supermart in Russia with an army until they pulled out and left. Because it was these more accurately, it was Gazprom and whatever other oil baron you want to name in Russia with an army.
I'm gonna post in the YouTube chat real quick under the
you can use the private chat. You can use the private chat on the Streamlabs if you want, so that we can just read it off.
All right. Let me do that also. I am posting Victoria Nuland's leaked audio transcripts where she discussed organizing the coup that overthrew the Ukrainian government.
Yeah, they can say, like, I completely agree that she probably talked about a coup. A lot of the opposition had.
She admitted.
Look at it like this.
She literally talked about giving them orders to do it.
Giving right sector orders? No, the guy who ran right sector at the time openly admitted to giving the orders himself.
I mean, there was numerous groups on the street, but
the biggest
many
by
of
far
them
was
were
right sector.
getting money from the CIA and taking orders from Victoria.
Yeah, there was many groups on the street. That's completely true. There was like 500,000 people in Maiden Square at the peak, right? But there was none of them armed. They showed up as protesters. Some of them had like shields. Some of them were wearing like, Soviet helmets and other equipment like that. None of them had guns. Right sector had showed up weeks before the Maiden protest for a completely different reason. Completely armed with shotguns and rifles and pistols and body armor, and had set up barricades on something like Haldrovika or something like that street, and had been brawling with police for weeks on the street, right? Then the Maideners came in over the EU shooting down their proposal to join to protest, to urge the government to be more European, to get into the EU faster, right? That was a popular demand at the time. Most Ukrainians wanted to join the EU. They still do, okay?
Then they wouldn't have elected Yanukovych.
Well,
the entire
issue
world
is
said
that
his
just
election
like
was fair and free.
Yeah, they say the elections in America are fair and free too.
Yeah,
and we all know that they're not. We all know that they're probably not.
Do you think your vote counts?
I spent a lot of time. I'm married to a Belarusian, and my kids are dual citizens, and I lived in Belarus for about 5 years, and I've been to Ukraine many times, and I don't see any real cultural differences.
I'm gonna tell you right now, Andrew. Ukraine is still corrupt as fuck.
It
is
even
extremely
under
corrupt.
Under Zelensky,
honestly, I don't hate
corruption
Zelensky.
has probably gotten worse.
The corruption has gotten worse in some places, has gotten better in others. Zelensky has done some interesting things like nationalization of the oil, which was against the U.S. demands, right? But yeah, aside from his out of line actions, right? He is just another populist, in all honesty. But like Andrew, things
he's
are
a
really
liberal.
corrupt.
He ran on legalizing prostitution and drugs.
He did run on that. Do you know what else he did? He ran on authoritarianism. He promised to fix the country himself. He was a populist.
So
right? He was a libertarian, but he was a libertarian.
I can say something funny, Seamus.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Zol.
So one of the ways they did raising money for Ukraine to get like Western money before like the whole war happened is they actually had a bunch of Ukrainian cam girls that were forced by the government to do cam girl work so they could bring
Fucking
money
hilarious.
from Westerners, and then they would siphon it off into the government.
Fucking base. Why aren't we
It sounds like
doing that?
It's like Eritrea, man. Eritrea does shit like that too.
Yeah, when the Russians
here
when the Russians actually came in, they actually recorded a video where they went to one of these facilities and they started beating the cam girls and breaking the shit.
Fucking
But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to paint any rose. I'm not going to give like a rose-tinted glasses view of things. It's corrupt as fuck. The military is corrupt. The police are corrupt. The government's corrupt, right? But it is just more open about its corruption than America is. I can guarantee you that those ballot boxes were fucking stuffed, and they still are stuffed. It's just stuffed in a different direction now because the private police that the pro-Russians had before is gone now. It's been disbanded, except for in Crimea where it still exists, right? So that pro-Russian police force, which did a lot of the private work, the political work for the pro-Russian parties and whatnot, it's gone. So now there's only pro-Ukrainian parties to do the exact same thing. So of course,
I mean, it's more visible to us because we're looking at it from an outsider's perspective. But I'm sure there's plenty of people that live outside of America that looked in on the 2020 election, for example, and they were like, "What the fuck?" I mean, like,
yeah, I mean, like, do you know how
The thing
you know
is,
how
I don't care
extensive
about
it
any
is?
of that.
Like,
It's aligned with my
Andrew,
enemies.
Andrew, I'm just pointing out that like the concept of being democratically elected and accepted as democratically elected is a very weak standard to stand on, right? Assad
Okay,
is considered democratically
I
elected.
can see that point. I can see that point.
But I can see
but,
what you mean. You agree that like I agree completely that pro-Russians did have a lot of control in the Ukraine.
They had a lot of support too, like in polling,
did.
but like, even polling can be argued against. I'm just saying that's the stuff that we have as reference.
Yeah, I know. We only have that as reference.
You can have a very vocal minority,
Okay,
and they can overthrow a government.
Andrew,
Yeah,
I wouldn't call the Odessa fighting an Odessa massacre.
They chased them into a building and set the building on fire. It was a massacre.
No. They took the building over themselves. First of all,
No,
they conquered
it was a street fight.
Here we go.
The Odessa Brigade, which was pro-Russian separatists, armed themselves and stormed the building and took it over, and then started street fights outside with local fucking hooligans from football matches. Like the local football club came out and started beating them up in the street, right? And then the fight extended until
on fire.
Yeah, football hooligans then Molotoved the building, and it got out of control, and like 17 people died. That's not a massacre.
Over 50.
Yeah, is that the number?
Yes, it's a bit over 50. It's somewhere like 54, 55. Like 11 of them children.
I've never heard of any children being in the building that was burnt in the trade union's house.
They used to have footage of the fire on YouTube
it's
where you
40
could watch
some
it.
odd and a few more dozen wounded. Those are the official numbers.
Okay, you're right. Yeah, 48 dead.
And a few
46
dozen
of whom were anti-Maidan pro-Russian activists.
Yeah, of the Odessa Brigade.
Somebody said Molotov the building. That's not a massacre.
Yeah,
but I could say something really fast regarding Zelensky. Actually,
just one second. I'm gonna round this off with my final point here. Right. The issue is that these before Right Sector got there, by the time the actual organized fighters got to the street fight, the building was burning, right, and people were dying. It was literally just fucking football hooligans who torched the building and then fled. And the people were barred inside because the Odessa Brigade had barricaded the windows to stop bullets from flying in because both sides were now shooting at each other. And that stopped them from getting out quickly. So then dozens of them got stuck and they burned alive. Now, I didn't hear of any children. I don't think there's been any side that claimed children.
I just reread it. You're correct. I was incorrect. I retract.
Okay. I wouldn't call that a massacre. It was definitely a fight. It was definitely one-sided, but I don't feel that was a massacre.
I mean, they killed almost 50 people. I consider.
Well, yeah, that's tactical. That's tactical failure on the Odessa side there.
By definition, technically, any victory with a huge skew in the casualties is a massacre. If you're going to
look at it that way, that's fine. If you're going to look at it that way,
I can say something really fast.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so initially when Zelensky was actually running for office, he actually ran on the platform of neutrality. And one of the reasons he broke neutrality off with Russia is because the Azov battalion, I think it was their leader or their second in command, did an interview with the BBC, where he basically said that if he continued a neutral position with Russia, they would kill him. And ever since then, Zelensky has been very anti-Russia.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, Right Sector published a thing that said when the war was over, they were going to coup the government again. So, like,
I mean, it's just inevitably these groups are fighting against Russia, not because they like each other, but because they have their own invested interest.
Well, I mean, we could also think about some of the groups that go over there. Like one of the journalists that's like a transgender is literally fighting in a. It's literally in a group. Well, they're literally in a group. They're literally in a group. It's full of a bunch of ISIS members. And
I thought that was the funniest part. She's literally in a Islamic jihadist unit. Excuse me, not she.
We don't like the. Well, that's because at the beginning, like nobody was turned away, right? The Ukraine thought it needed a lot more people than it really did, and like, so they were handing out guns to anybody across the border. That's how I got in. I went to Poland and then walked across, and I got a gun within like 6 hours. It was crazy. But yeah, they let in a lot of fucking crazies. So they didn't ask for names. They didn't ask for anything. You just walked in and they gave you a weapon.
So, what about the footage and also documentation of people like in Azov crucifying people, beheading people, castrating them, and shooting them and putting them in graves?
Every like I said, everybody has their crazies, and in a war, people are inevitably going to do horrific war crimes. Both sides do it. Americans did it in Afghanistan. Taliban did it to Americans.
Yeah, I know they do it, but it's more. I know they like everybody does it in the war, but there's also occurrences where you have one side doing it way more than the other side, and I mean, like
that Russia commits far more wide-scale attacks.
I would also,
while
Ukrainians, if I could just interject,
if you're talking about hitting like civilian stuff, the only reason why that happens because they put artillery and heavy weaponry in civilian centers.
I'm not talking about the artillery shelling. Shelling is innate with war, right? I'm not worried about the shelling. It's like in Burka, in Kilpiansk, and a couple of other places. I even saw one of the basements in one of the small villages after the Kharkiv counteroffensive. The Russians are very brutal occupiers. They will kill, they will rape, they will murder at their own will, right? So when I compare the travesties of war, I say that the Russians are more wide scale desolation. They'll just kill people and move on, kind of thing, mass graves, that kind of stuff. While the Ukrainian nationalists who do commit war crimes, like Azov used to, like Adar used
Tornado
to, right?
Battalion.
Well, they still do. Some of the stuff's being investigated.
Right? Yeah, I know.
By the UN.
I was talking now. There is a little harder to do because they got more eyes on them, right? But like when it was War Crime Central at like the beginning of the war and in 2014, right? Their war crimes were more targeted and more brutal, but they weren't very wide scale, right? So like if you compare them,
the separatists were on the defensive the entire time.
Well, not the entire time.
I mean,
Gherkin launched a brilliant
Sparta Battalion or Somalia Battalion did.
Okay,
and Tornado Battalion
Gherkin launched a brilliant counteroffensive in the direction of like Solidar and
Drelkov, shout out.
Yeah, I have no issues. He was a brilliant officer. I have no issues admitting that. He was. Gherkin was a brilliant
I can think of something. Why would, for example, like Azov Battalion shooting civilians when they were fleeing to the Russian side because they didn't want them going to Russia?
Slovyansk was just a brilliant action. Okay, I'll give Gherkin that. All right, the March to Slovyansk was brilliant.
On Azov, but I don't think it's. I mean, I think it's kind of disingenuous to take the crimes of Azov, which are very real, and then
it's far more documented.
The crimes of the entire Ukrainian nation. Like that seems like a bit of a stretch to me.
Like,
because Azov is what? How many?
Everybody has. It's.
I mean, we're talking about a country that does illegal arms smuggling to like radical Islam, has also child sex trafficking, and also like state cam girls and like drug dealing.
State cam girls is a funny thing, right? Drug dealing, I haven't actually seen any kind of proof of that. I've heard accusations of that stuff before. Mostly surrounded by the fact that like they claim Zelensky's like a hardcore coke addict.
Quick question.
It's more fentanyl related.
Doesn't Afghanistan does like opium?
It does. The Taliban was engaged in to some extent were engaged in opium dealing, but now that they're the government, they don't have to.
Yeah, right.
They collect taxes.
So, like, what about, like, did you ever see the Mariupol interviews where, like, civilians were actually happy that the Russians took over because, like,
well, yeah,
the
okay, so
Ukrainians
there's
were
always going to be
killing the
somebody.
Ukrainian civilians because they were fleeing from the war?
I've heard some of that. I've never like seen the interviews, but I've heard talk about that amongst the guys here. But like, for what we understand is that a lot of that's overblown. By both sides, honestly. Ukraine's like the SBU likes overstating how much you Russian soldiers hate being in the Ukraine. They like to do that. It keeps morale up. So they like publish these things all the time. The SBU, it's like, oh, these Russian soldiers are calling home and crying and wishing they could go home. It's all nonsense. It's purely for morale reasons they do that kind of stuff, right? And the Russians do the same thing with how they claim Ukrainian street citizens. There will always be some cases where there's cruelty to civilians. It's inevitable.
This was documented by CNN, but then they pulled the video and tried deleting it. They tried deleting it off the internet, and but people were able to archive it.
I completely believe that there are people who genuinely think that Russia's liberating them, and I do believe that Azov or other nationalist units would easily shoot somebody who espoused pro-Russian values in the middle of the war. I don't doubt that whatsoever, at all.
I just want to hold on.
Okay.
Fucking Bernardo O'Higgins, both side moment. Yeah, the world is not black and white. It's not just good guys versus bad guys. The reality is, especially in a situation like this one, is that it's highly nuanced, and there are good people and bad people on both sides. It's boring, but that's the reality of it.
All right, I'd like to just say this real quick. I don't want to really get too bogged down in just Ukraine. I'd hope we'd switch to the greater geopolitical sense of it.
Yeah, I understand.
So my final thing on Ukraine is going to be 2 points. They are aligned with my enemies and with the enemies of the entire, human race, really. Any person that values individual cultures, ethnicity, religion, traditional morality. Ukraine is aligned with the people who are against those things. The gay, the global American empire. So that is the PSF stance on this. Anyone aligned with the gay is our enemy. So Ukraine should lose.
Acronym that Fascist came up with.
Second point is that there's lots of nationalists who say, "Oh, Azov nationalists, this and that," but because of their alignment,
I don't understand why people look to Azov so much. Azov is like the smallest of the national groups.
Whatever.
It's mostly neo-Nazis that do them.
Any Ukrainian thing.
Like,
but there's
the right sector is by far the
sectors
biggest
of the white nationalist community that look at this as some big thing. And let me tell you this right now. This is my opinion. Because, the United I'm going to give a historical example. The Ku Klux Klan, if anybody's ever seen the movie Mississippi Burning, it was based on this event. They couldn't infiltrate the Klan. So the FBI brought torturers from the mafia down to Mississippi, and these mafiosos kidnapped and butt raped and tortured some Klansmen until they were able to get witness statements that they handed over to the FBI. If there ever was some type of happening, some great event like the Day of the Rope and all this stuff that the WN community likes to think about, the liberals would bring Azov over here in a second, and they would help them hunt you down because they would want to keep their javelins and their missiles coming.
Because they're pragmatic.
They are more aligned with their interests, and their interests is the gay. They're not our allies. They're not our friends.
More accurately,
we just have to look. We just have to look where mainstream fascism is coming from nowadays, and it's being propped up by America.
I don't think so. America's not propping.
Can I say this?
I don't think there is.
I mean, as somebody who's sympathetic to the ideology, the mainstream of it is being propped up by the military-industrial complex.
I don't think so.
I've never gotten an offer from the military-industrial complex. People who call themselves fascists,
guys,
say there is a mainstream. It's people that just scream the fucking N-word and don't know shit about economics. So, I'm not really too concerned.
Fair enough.
Okay, go ahead there, Dirk.
I just want to say this for a couple of things. Well, one, my opinion on Ukraine is, it is a foreign problem. I do sympathize with the people on both sides. The war is
Completely reasonable stance.
the war is bad. All right. I have Ukrainian coworkers and Russian coworkers. They both don't like the war whatsoever. They both say, it's a waste of time. It's just one big flex on the other. Um, Second, Andrew, Belarus is a base country.
Yeah, I love Belarus.
Um, um, you know,
It
as
definitely
you know,
deserves a more stable man than Lukashenko.
it kind of does, to be honest. But then again, it's better to be a dictator than gay. It's a really base quote. Don't get me wrong there.
I'll say something real quick about Lukashenko, and
Mhm.
I'm going to talk about my family's, my wife's family's experience, but they're my family now. So mother-in-law, father-in-law, all these type of people. So when the
Mhm.
Soviet Union fell, there was instant chaos. Basically, as the Soviet Union had all these state-owned industries. That's how you have oligarchs now in Russia. The government sold these industries worth billions for pennies to mafioso. And so all these mafioso came in and this and that and this and that and took over everything. They were extorting people. My wife's family got extorted by mafias. And that lasted for about a year or two. And then came Lukashenko. And when he was first elected, he was so beloved. People treated him like a saint. When he would appear in public, women would cry. They would reach out to touch him because he became president, and all of these oligarchs mysteriously committed suicide. And he retook control of all of the state industries and reinstituted the entire Soviet system. So, like, even though Belarus has lower income than, say, Russia, Belarus has a higher standard of living. Minsk
Yeah,
is clean.
I don't like
Minsk is safe.
using GDP or anything like that to measure the standard of
So
success
to
of a
say
country.
like unstable or this or that, he's
Oh, I never
centrist,
said it was
but he brought
unstable. What I said
safety. He's brought
what I said
safety,
is
security, and stability to the nation. And
as any
Is
strongman
that
would.
an intentional
and
Emperor
nobody
Palpatine
starves.
quote?
That's the whole point of Lukashenko. Nobody starves. Some people on their pensions, maybe they have to buy the discount sausages. But unlike Russia and Ukraine, Lukashenko made sure pensions came on time. All the old Soviet pensions, all these veterans, and all the other Soviet breakaways, Russia, Ukraine, Moldova, etc., the pensions just stopped. Not in Belarus.
There's a lot to give Lukashenko. What I'm saying though is that he's getting older. He's bowing more to Putin, and I think that Belarus would do with a younger, more agile dictator than Lukashenko. That's
His
what I was trying.
son's probably going to take over.
Well, making it hereditary would probably be a poor decision. I think Lukashenko should seek out a young, like somebody in their 30s, to mentor for a couple of years before he retires, and then
He's
give him.
planning on
kind of
from
evidence that the whole hereditary
what
thing
he's
doesn't
said
work.
so far. He's got he's planning on somebody else will be president eventually, but most power will be in the hands of what's called the National Security Council, about half of which is made up of Lukashenko's sons. So like the
I
powers
feel
of the
that that's a
presidency
bit
will be
nepotistic. I feel like
It's
Yeah.
kind of like a
Lukashenko would do
grand
for-
council of a president, really.
I feel like
It's-
Lukashenko would do far
It's
better.
kind of it's kind
if
of
he
like the
approached it-
NKVD.
I think Lukashenko would do far better if he approached it in a more opportunity, like not like in a more open way, a more idealist way. If he found loyal men that weren't his children, right, and mentored them into a more prepared place to take over after him, rather than just handing it off to his kids. I feel that's going to breed badly, and I think that's going to give more power to the Belarusian opposition, who's now gaining military experience in the Ukraine, right? And I think that it would be better to offer amnesty as well to those who had been exiled.
I agree they need to be offered amnesty. I was there during the protests. I was living there during the big democracy protests, and I got to tell you, seeing neo-Nazis basically marching down the street with lesbians and feminists, holding hands against the government, that was a real eye-opener to me about the nature of fascism. in the modern era.
Well, I wouldn't call Nazis fascists. That's not very
Yeah, I
fair.
would also.
But I mean, you guys still support, or like a lot of these neo-fascist groups still side with like America. Like Casa Pound is pro-Ukraine.
Yeah, they are. It's great. Cosmo's great. They're also pro Karen Republic in Myanmar, which is also great. Karens are great guys.
All right, so can we move on to some other countries internationally? I was hoping to
sure, definitely
discuss. China was just recently able to broker peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and I think it's a major geopolitical win.
I have no issues with China. Xi Jinping's a decent guy. I know Octavian and the NFP have a more geopolitical, pragmatic stance about China, about it being a threat to America. But honestly, I feel Xi Jinping has been an effective leader, although China is definitely going down its historical line of, it'll have good leaders and then it'll slowly collapse.
So,
anyway.
if you don't like China, the only way
I
you
don't
need to
dislike China.
I'm just saying, if you don't like China, the only way to approach the issue is reindustrialize, cut trade off with them entirely, then just become self-sufficient, and then
that
most
is
of
part
their
of the
economy would
NFP.
collapse.
In our most recent article on our website,
That's the NFP's model. That's what.
Yeah.
But that's why China is
Yeah.
focusing on the Belt and Road initiative, so it doesn't have to rely on America anymore.
Wants to expand its geopolitical power into the Middle East. It's been doing that for a long time with
Europe,
modern Silk
Europe
Road.
too.
Yeah, well, that's all part of the modern Silk Road project.
But
where
I mean,
they're
that's
building ports and
the
highways
NFP
from China all the way into Europe.
Yeah, Europe, Africa, etc., etc.
Our standpoint is that, like, inevitably we're going to have to bring our industry back home because conflict with China seems almost inevitable at this point. Even if we don't want it, China wants it. They've got beef with us for the last couple hundred years, and they'd like to get it back in blood. And the only way
they want to get it back for Peking,
Octavian, whenever you're finished with your point, let me jump in here.
Real quick, just real quick.
You're right there, Doug?
All right, sorry. Sen, if you're listening, right, just letting you know, China's fake. Taiwan's do a government, and you guys go.
All right, Nancy Pelosi.
Don't fighting words right there.
Octavian, do you still want to make a point, or do you want me to get in there?
sorry, I was messing with
I can't hear him.
I think he's messing with his mic or something. But go ahead, Andrew. I think he.
Okay, let me hop in here. So, I keep hearing it phrased as us. We do not have a country. We are occupied by an evil empire that is international. It's a multinational octopus stretching all around the world, and it rules from DC and, of course, New York, as well as Tel Aviv, and London and Kiev. There, its centers at the moment, but worrying about a conflict between China and our evil empire that oppresses us it's a nonsense to me, because we have to. So you're saying, okay, we have a plan. We need to reindustrialize, so we'll be prepared for a war with China. Okay, what matters right now is getting the globalist boot off our necks and getting our country back. And that's going to require
way to get your
a revolution and a palingenesis, a rebirth of the American ethnos. So right now, China is more our ally than the people who rule us. China is not making us gay. China is not derailing trains in Ohio, killing thousands of people, this horrible poisons. China is not putting these chemicals in our food that make us fat and lazy and stupid.
All they do is fly balloons in the sky that look very beautiful.
I just want to butt in real quick.
I cannot hear you, Octavian.
Your mic is you're like very far away from your mic or something.
I think the Mossad got to him.
Finally eliminated. But I'll go ahead with my point there, is that I think Octavian and the NFP want to achieve that removal of the boot and everything by bringing back industry and everything, right? So now they have a stronger and
Okay, can you guys
job-filled
hear me?
America.
Can you guys hear me now? Is it
Yeah, that's
Yes.
better.
is it back? Okay. So the point I was trying to make was, it was rather a question I was going to ask, and it might be somewhat rhetorical, but I want you to humor me. Do you think that Xi Jinping or the Chinese Communist Party necessarily cares who's in charge over here in America? And also, to add on to that, you said China is not the one that's making us gay. Well, I think that China is doing its part to contribute to the destabilization of the West. I mean, I know that you're, not saying this disrespectfully, but I know you're a little bit older than me, and so likely you don't have like TikTok or much of the social
No,
media
I've
that a
never
lot of
used
the
any of
kids
that.
are on these days.
Either have I.
I would advise you to just perform an experiment one day. Go get the app and open up an account and see the kind of content that ends up on a fresh accounts page, and understand that this content is being fed into the system from certain individuals that, of course, work for the Chinese government. TikTok is owned by the Chinese Communist. Well, it's owned by ByteDance, which is owned by members of the Chinese Communist Party. So you see the point I'm trying to make. It's like China is absolutely contributing to the destabilization of the West.
So
Can I make a counter argument real quick,
right.
Zolt?
Yeah.
This will be like 3 minutes. Somebody in the comments just said, "Doesn't China make the fentanyl though?" And that's absolutely a fantastic point. But I'm from Michigan, so I have a personal, very deep experience with the opiate epidemic. I've lost many friends.
I've lost people too, man.
Many people very close to me, and I think what's important to understand is the opiate epidemic started with OxyContin, which came from the Sackler family, who are of a particular ethnicity. And very interestingly,
members
if you
of a
look into
funny
their
tribe.
genealogy, we go back to the Opium Wars, which were fought by the British on behalf of a family known as the Sassoons, who are also of a particular ethnicity. These families are related. Great grandpa Sackler, who started Purdue Pharma, married into the Sassoon family. So when the opium situation ended in China, this particular ethnicity relocated to the United States and started OxyContin.
Oh yeah,
and
man.
repeated
Absolutely.
the exact
they use drugs
same thing.
to wage war on.
And these people are in charge of our country. They're not working on behalf of China. They for hundreds of years screwed China over. They fought a war. They had the British on their behalf fight a war to keep their boots on the neck of the Chinese, and the Chinese communists threw them out. And after they were thrown out, they just came here and repeated the same thing to destroy us. So instead of blaming China, we have to look at who this particular group is.
Well, this was kind of
the
a point
core
that
the core point that guy was trying to make is that now China is doing it as well, right? Not so much
right,
that
because
like
our government is their enemy. So of
So
course you're going to do
part of the
stuff to
reason
destabilize them. The USA funds Antifa
China,
in Hong Kong and funds gay propaganda
China,
all around the world.
I feel China feels that everybody in the West is their enemy and always have been. I think that they haven't forgotten the opium wars, that they haven't forgotten the trade legislation, right? They haven't forgotten the international settlements of their cities like Shanghai. So I don't think that they've stopped caring about that, right? I think the Chinese Communist Party wants its revenge, regardless of what government rules in a foreign land, what the placations are willing to give to China. I think China just wants its revenge, honestly, to some degree. I think that they blame the West for everything that went wrong, that for the millions of people who died in the warlord eras when the West, both sides of the West and East, Russia, it was in it too, were arming various sides of the Chinese Civil War to watch millions of Chinamen go and die for this cause or that cause, or for this warlord or that warlord, right? And then they funded two sides of another Asian dispute in Korea, right? And then they funded two sides of another Asian dispute in Vietnam, right? And it didn't seem to matter that China was trying to stabilize its own region, that China was trying to bring itself back to the international stage, because the West hated it. It hates the West for the exact same reasons. Even long before liberal capitalism became a reality, if you go back to the 1700s, the first European diplomats to arrive in China, they spat at the Qing emperor. They refused to kowtow, stuff like that. It's just been a line of insults to the Chinese traditions and the Chinese people that the CPC will not let go of. So I don't think they care if a socialist government comes to power a patriotic socialist government comes to power in America.
So
I think they'll continue to influence as much as they can from afar to cause as much chaos and damage.
Yeah, so I just want to say,
if it came to conflict, the PSF is not advocating that a future PSF ran America kneel to another nation. I in fact embrace militancy. What I'm suggesting is
when
that
China goes for Taiwan and Taiwan looks to
our
America, what will
government-
PSF do?
who cares about Taiwan?
Okay.
I mean,
And then when they go for the Philippines after that,
who cares about the Philippines?
And then when they go for Australia after
if
that,
the liberals
I don't care about
are still
Australia.
in power, if the liberals are still in power, I support whoever is fighting against them.
So
Be it China, the Taliban,
I
Iran,
asked specifically,
whoever.
Andrew, if you say you took power tomorrow, right, and the next day China invades Taiwan, what's the immediate response? Just off the top of your head.
Oh yeah, goodbye Taiwan.
We're in power.
Yeah, if you were in power, say you
Yeah,
took power.
if we were in power, we would give Taiwan to China. They can have Taiwan.
We would reach out and say, Taiwan's in your traditional sphere of influence. However, we need the chips. So, I assume you understand Taiwan has like a international monopoly on computer chips, semiconductors, superconductors, etc. We would reach out diplomatically and say, look, we're going to need the chips. Other than that, you do what you
China
want.
doesn't give those up?
Well, I embrace the idea of a permanent revolution internationally. So,
so you
militancy.
Resist China.
Yes.
You would resist China.
So,
there's
so
the crux
you
of the thing.
acknowledge then that there's still a line in the sand that needs to be drawn, because that's really what I care about.
I want to say something real quick, Andrew. So, part of the reason why China is more hostile with us, now, you do have the long historical example as to why, but part of the reason why they're a lot more hostile at the moment is because the Biden administration, also the Trump administration, have been saber rattling with China. And most people, when they think Trump, they think about the trade, but obviously with Biden, it has more to do with Taiwan. But what they don't talk about is the missile tests on the islands next to China. They also don't talk about the nuclear weapons tests and the Bikini Islands that could also strike China very quickly, or U.S. naval ships having warning shots, firing them at Chinese naval ships, even though they're in open sea trade water areas.
So first of all, the Bikini Atoll tests weren't directed to scare China. They were to test the effects of nuclear weapons against ships for possible ship use of nuclear torpedoes. And it was
part of the reason they have the facilities there is so they can strike China.
There's no nukes in Bikini Atoll. It's too small of a chain of islands to facilitate a silo of any kind. It just doesn't fit. The islands are not very big. They're not very deep either.
Have you ever seen The Coming War with China?
No, I haven't. But I can.
Two-hour documentary, but the guy literally goes to a military base there, gets a permit for it, and goes through the entire area.
There are military bases there.
They literally had a nuclear area.
I will have to watch the documentary. So if you send it to me or whatever, I'll
try to
give it a view if I have any time. Right. So yeah, and as for competing with China in the open trade waters, warning shots and whatnot, China declares them open trade waters. But in reality, most of the articles I've read discussing that issue, it was when China entered the territorial waters of the Philippines to build their islands so that they can expand their own territorial waters. China isn't going to negotiate. Xi Jinping has made that very clear. He's doubled his nuclear stockpile. He's built nuclear bunkers for his people. He's not going to negotiate. He's going to take what he wants, and that's it.
Kind of sounding like a neocon right now, bro.
Well, I'm not trying to be a neocon. It's just the truth, right? Xi Jinping is not going to negotiate.
But here, I'm gonna throw a ball real quick. So, America's sphere of influence should just be North America. China should just be Asia, and it should have its trade routes like it traditionally had. Russia can have Eurasia, and then we could have possibly an independent Europe controlled by Germany that has an economic connection to Russia.
PSF,
if anybody's going to lead Europe, if anybody's going to lead Europe,
should be Germany.
France. It's going to be France. France is more economically stable. It is just a superior country in every sense of the modern term.
They're also west of the Rhine. There's no civilization east.
Anti-German action.
National Bolshevism. We support Prussianism, hardcore Prussianism.
But if there's going to be a European Union that has more like cohesiveness or just a strong Europe, it's going to be from France. France is just the best predisposed to do that.
I say
even
Bosnia.
still,
I say Bosnia.
Bosnia, Europe. That's the future. It's here to hear first.
And when Octavian comes back, we just get into the race argument stuff.
Sure, we can move on to that when he gets back.
Oh yeah, the real epic gamer moment.
Even if France does become the hegemonic power of Europe, it's still going to align itself with America.
Well, yeah, France did fund our revolution.
Yeah, honestly, France is.
Hopefully, Marie Le Pen can turn things around.
I feel like Maria has become too much of a mainstream populist to really make effective change. There are definitely radical sectors.
10 years ago.
There definitely are still radical sectors of her party, but the majority of them, I think, have become like national conservatives.
And keep in mind, she's like nothing compared to what her father was. I mean, her father.
Yeah, her father was a fucking whack job.
Yeah. But at least he had the spirit in him to carry out a true, societal revolution, even if, I disagree with maybe his exact beliefs on certain things. But, Marine Le Pen doesn't really seem to have that.
The devil of the Republic.
I'm pretty sure that's the new guy, Zepior, whatever the fuck.
No. It was a nickname for Jean-Marie.
Yeah, but
they used to call him
in the
Devil
modern
of the Republic.
In the modern sense, the new devil of the Republic's got to be that new guy with his party, like Reconquista, it's called, right? Yeah, he's a Jew, right? He's an Algerian Jew, but he's like incredibly Jew. Yeah, and he's incredibly anti-Semitic, which is fucking hilarious in and of itself.
We know a guy like that.
Bernardo Higgins got it. Zamor, that's the guy. He's incredibly racist, incredibly anti-Semitic, and he's an Algerian Jew.
Yeah. Sus.
Oh yeah, so Andrew, the race discussion. So.
Wait. Hold on.
It's not real. It's fake. It was invented by the capitalists. So
hold on. Ready?
Yes. Go ahead, Dirk.
Body soul distinction.
Two things. One, everybody. Race for now.
You're this video deleted, are you?
TED total everyone death.
Two, don't forget this, guys. Maybe shocker, but
can I say the N word?
But I'm actually black.
Please no.
I'm actually black, guys.
We're risking it. We're risking it with the race.
All right, I'll do it at the very end.
Yeah, we're literally.
No, please don't. Please don't at all.
Being up by having this discussion at all.
Yes, please.
I won't.
But I'm actually black, guys. Just letting you know. For the comments who don't know this.
My Ziga.
Anyways, race relations.
NFP diversity. Anyway.
Anyways,
you gotta say it with a Z, Ziga.
Anyways, race relations. Andrew, I want to hear your opinion first.
Yes, sir. Basically, I believe race is real. Culture derives in large part not just from environment, but from what's called epigenetics, a genetic influence on behavior. Having said that, I believe all humans have a right to dignity. So, like, the PSF's view on this is that identity, including racial identity, is going to be central to a person's makeup. So, like, that has to be respected. And we have to find a way to work together because the United States is a multiracial nation. So there has to be a way for all of us to have our separate identities and also come together and work for the material and spiritual dignity of the entire American people. But I also believe that what's traditionally called white Americans have a sort of like spiritual proprietary claim to the country. Like the Russian Constitution had been changed recently by Putin in 2018 to reflect that ethnic Russians are what's called the state forming ethnicity. And I believe, white Americans have that position here and would have that position in a future United States. So we envision sort of a federation of autonomous zones.
Civilizational state with autonomous, semi-autonomous republics that are under a federation.
So South Africa.
More like the Soviet
no, more
Union.
like China or the Soviet Union.
Which is where South Africa got the idea from, is the Soviet Union. By giving Botswana and Zululand and all those really places effective autonomy and control over their own areas.
Yeah, but they did that while being a extreme minority.
Yeah, and they did that while being an apartheid state as well.
Yeah, we don't need apartheid though.
We're talking about something completely different. So like
the
black.
We're talking about like a fraternal union where people have
then the hardcore Soviet stance, where like every minority ethnicity has its own like Soviet Republic, like the Jewish Oblast and Soviet Republic, the German Oblast and the Soviet Republic.
The main guys. So there'd be
Ukrainians.
So we're going by like for us,
like Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Pennsylvania. That would be the German American Republic. New England, the kind of like Anglo Republic. Somewhere in the South would be a Black American Republic where everything is going to work on the Black Belt. Everything there would work on their behalf and preserve their culture and their people, and vice versa.
Part of that too is also about police reform. So like defunding the FBI, defunding the CIA, then also demilitarizing the police and putting more of an emphasis on community policing.
There are some reasonable stances there. I completely agree with those things, right?
And there's
more on community polices and that kind of stuff. They work more effectively, and it's less about a culture of fear and control than it is about a culture of cooperation.
Yeah,
Andrew.
Absolutely. Yes.
But for your stance, I'll let Dark go.
Can you remind me? Yeah, can you remind me? What is the Black Belt again? I keep on forgetting about it.
It's basically
an area.
like
it literally goes through like the entirety of the South.
It's your based homeland, Lord Dark. You need to return.
It's like this area goes through the entire South. That's just like full of black. It's like majority black. It's like the size of a small continent.
So it's like Mississippi, Louisiana, and
Alabama. It's literally in It's literally in all the southern states but Texas.
All right.
All the deep South states.
Okay, but Octavian, just letting you know, my home. Okay, if you want to trace back my lineage, it's literally like to Nigeria, then Dominican, and then after that, Louisiana Creole.
Saw that coming.
So, Andre,
Independent Cajuns.
I feel that the constructs of
Base people.
We also want to. Right? Also, we need to annex Canada. That's something that needs to be said.
Oh yeah, dude, definitely. I fucking agree, dude. I get so much shit for saying that shit. I say, guys, we should probably annex Canada.
Maybe Mexico too.
Yeah, dude, this entire fucking hemisphere, like North and South America, it's our fucking manifesto.
Pretty sure you made a post about it.
Yeah, and people soyed about it, but I don't care. God has
the PSF
willed that
also
Americans
endorses
rule this side of the earth. So fucking cope.
Anyways, the stance on like having ethnic republics, I feel, will inevitably lead to a similar thing to the Soviet Union or the South Africans, where there's going to be disunity, and these autonomous republics are going to act in purely their own interests, and it's going to lead to a very dilapidated and disunited federal government trying to make any kind of approach to a foreign power. So, like, as you said, you draw the line on like China not being willing to negotiate over Taiwan, right? Well, what happens if, say, the New England Republic coalizes with the Californian Hispanic Republic and refuses to send people to Taiwan to defend it. While on the flip side, the Deep South Black Republic and the, I don't know, WASP Southern Republic that is in like Kentucky, Tennessee, and all that, those areas, and West
Hell
Virginia.
yeah.
And they're all going gung ho for it, and they're going to go to
So-
war, right?
Right. So
What happens
these
then?
republics are not going to have that level of autonomy.
It's more
They're gonna have the
similar.
level
It's
of-
like you know how like a state like in America has like autonomy,
Sure.
similar to that.
So you're talking
like,
about
we're talking about
It's
in
like
the Black Belt-
semi-autonomous, but it's not like
Right.
autonomous enough where it can
What
break off
happens-
and be crazy.
What happens when a governor raises a state militia and refuses to follow federal orders?
So East Germany used to have this thing called the combat groups of the working class.
I'll be back.
Who's that? Zolt, you're taking off for a second?
Yeah. that's what I said.
Anyway, so these combat groups of the working class were basically a militia, nationwide militia.
So yeah,
under the
a
control
national
of the federal
militia
government.
and a paramilitary.
Yeah, and a paramilitary that
national
was like an
National
auxiliary
militia.
police.
Yeah.
So we would have a similar thing, and it would be nationwide. And this combat group in every ethnic autonomous region would be loyal to the central government. There would
So
the
it would lead
central
to an
government. We've
immediate
embraced Juche, the
localized-
idea of the great leader principle. Power is going to be centralized. There's not going to be any opportunity for any type of governors to kind of break away.
So then these
We're
aren't
talking
states,
about
then,
in
right?
these
are
no.
these can't be
Let me
autonomous
describe
republics.
this for you. So like a black belt republic.
Okay.
Okay. The school system is going to focus on Black history and et cetera, and uplifting ethnic pride and this and that, allowing people feel, how to describe it. They get angry and what's the freaking word I'm looking for? The unrest happens when people feel that they are, being pushed to the side, exterminated, whatever you want to call it. And Black Americans have been, disenfranchised. Exactly. That's the word I was looking for. Black Americans have been screwed over by this government. I mean, people could say like, oh, conditions in slavery were better than in Africa. But okay, what about the CIA bringing crack cocaine into the Black community?
I don't disagree whatsoever. But
this
my
government
question surrounds
screwed them
the point,
over.
like, what happens when they don't want to follow the central authority, right? When you give them that autonomy and no longer do they see themselves as Americans, now they see themselves as Black Beltians or whatever you call them.
Right.
It's the point of the collective identity is something
That's
that we
what
believe
happened.
is
That's what happened
preserved.
in Volga, Germany, right? With the Volga German Oblast, the Soviet Union, and the Green Ukraine Oblast in the Soviet Union, right? These people, it was good. It's good meaning. I don't. You're not like bad meaning in this, and it wasn't bad meaning when the Soviets did either, right? But what it leads to is inherently these ethnic groups are going to collaborate together, and they're going to resist you, and they're going to resent you.
We have that now.
Yo, I came back for a sec just to say I'm gonna be gone for a little longer because my dog took a big shit in the house and there's fucking diarrhea everywhere. I'm sorry.
It's all right, man.
It's all right, man.
But like, just to finish my point.
What
here,
you're
Andrew, right?
talking about, we have that already in the United States.
Yeah, I know you already have it in the United States. Except what's going to happen when you create this this autonomy for these people is that that's going to get worse. Those mindsets aren't going to change overnight. You're going to create.
We're not talking about some overnight thing where we just separate. We're talking about a complete cultural revolution.
Yeah. So like, what happens in the interim, right? So say like this revolution kicks off next year or 10 years, right? You still in America still have the racial issues, right? There's still people fighting each other in the streets and everything, right? Black Lives Matter or whatever, burning down fucking precincts, all that kind of stuff. That's still happening. And you have your cultural revolution, right?
You're talking about our post-revolution?
So like, yeah, I'm talking about like, so like, let's say your revolution happens, you take power now, right?
Yes.
How are you going to achieve those republics without leading the groups like Black Lives Matter, who have probably gone underground by this point, right? from just popping back up there sporadically, sort of like how the Banderites did in the Ukraine, or like how the National Russian Soldarists did in the Soviet Union as a whole, like the white emigres, right? How do you
So
prevent
I'll
that from
say
happening?
there's kind of two things there. One, we intend to have allied black groups that can unite the black population,
Of course.
as well as the
I
white
mean,
population,
that's what
etc.
Lenin did
So
with the Ukrainians, right? He
right.
allied the Soviet Ukrainians, and they supported him. Except there was
So
still a whole lot of Ukrainians who joined the OUNM and OUMB, right?
right. So you got carrot and the stick. I'm not going to get graphic, but the PSF is going to do what is
A
necessary to
revolution,
maintain
right?
power.
You're gonna have
The
your
revolution is not going to be. It's not going to be reversed. That's
Yep.
non-negotiable.
It's going to be the Kronstadt response, where you send in the troops and you crush these ethnic minorities and whatnot, and you drive them all underground again, right? And then what happens in 20 years when their kids have been convinced that you made 1,000 martyrs of their fathers and grandfathers, when your political paramilitary came in and wiped them the fuck out, because of course you've succeeded in your revolution. You now have the authority of force, right? And you wipe out these I want to use black this time, these Hispanic revolutionaries, right?
Hopefully
You
they're on our
completely
side.
wipe the
But
fly.
I'm
Like,
sure some
yeah,
of them are on
hopefully,
our
right?
side.
Yeah, some of them definitely. You'll have collaborators no matter what. That's an inevitability of the world. There will always be collaborators, right? For anything. There were Soviets who supported the Nazis, right? Slavs who supported. There was Jews who supported the Nazis, right? So like, you'll always have collaborators, but they'll never be enough to fully convince all those people
Right,
that
but you
you're
don't
not the
need
enemy.
everybody.
No,
And
well, in
the
Ireland,
people
for
that
example,
won't
right?
go along with the revolution are
Here's something.
anti-revolutionary. They have to
Yeah,
go.
they are, right? Here's something that's easier to compare, for me at least, and I think it makes sense in this context too. Ireland, right, spent 800 years as an integral part of Britain, and every 50 years, no matter what the British did, even if they killed millions of Irish people, the Irish revolted, would take over swaths of the countryside.
Want to know how they
entrench
prevent
their
that now?
Beliefs. They can't prevent it.
Oh no,
They've
they
never
turned the North Protestant and the South is still
Yeah,
Catholic.
they tried. The Protestant still revolted in 1798. The Protestants revolted anyway,
But they'll never
because guess
unify.
they do reunify. The
They won't.
1798
They won't
revolt.
ever reunify because of their religious
Oh,
differences.
in the modern day, that's the Protestants are a minority now. The unification is an inevitability due to demographics. Irish Catholics will have more children than Unionist Protestants.
Well, too bad you
So
got those open borders right now.
all 700 black people who immigrated to Ireland are really going to make a big difference.
Ireland
They're
has fallen. It's over.
It's
700
over.
black
Ireland,
people. It's
like
so
that. That's the
over.
reaction of ethno-nationalists in Ireland. 700
I mean-
black people migrated to Dublin, and that was it. They were posting everywhere that Ireland was done. It had been invaded. It's over. Right? It's nonsense. Nobody wants to live in Ireland, dude. We don't even want to live in Ireland. It's shit.
There's
Fair
There's
enough.
barely any
potatoes
jobs.
everywhere.
The houses are expensive as fuck. The government's completely
Open the borders up,
incompetent.
apparently, evidently.
And there's fucking little men that have pots of gold that run around.
Exactly, and they won't share the pots of gold. So we're all broke. That's where the GDP goes. I swear.
Yes, and yes, and lucky charms too.
Anyways, for the sake of this point, right? So what will happen when you do this, right? Same thing that happened in the Soviet Union, same thing that's going to happen in China, right? Is that these ethnic minorities, even if you placate them, even if you entrench your collaborators in them, even if you effectively give them independence, they will still fight you, because that is what they do. Unless you fundamentally change what it means to be a part of America, right? And fundamentally
obviously that's
indoctrinate
the
these
intention.
youths. Well, how are you going to do that if they have their own autonomous thing, teaching their own education? Like you said, teach
Right,
Black
so,
history and that stuff. Teach
as
their pride of their ethnicity. That's exactly what the British did in Ireland initially, right? They
Right.
encouraged the Gaels, especially those who collaborated, right, to encourage Irish tradition amongst their people. And know what that led to? That led to 2 million dead and a civil war that lasted 10 years. Okay,
Right. So
exactly what it led to.
revolution gets followed by cultural revolution.
Mhm.
When the entire society and in fact the culture itself gets reoriented towards our vision.
So like in the Soviet Union.
After that is when we start kind of federalizing up.
So how long is the gap?
Well, as long as the revolution takes. But, obviously we believe in eternal revolution.
So then forever.
So there will never be an autonomous republic.
No. There's it's like Juche. The revolution is eternal, but there's
It works
phases
in North
to
Korea because there are, one, no minorities in North Korea,
Yeah,
and
it
two,
could work here too.
because the Kim regime, right, uses violence and paranoia extensively. I mean, they kill a lot of people all the time to maintain the state. They have to. It's just a part of how the regime works, right? There are
Right, but
definitely
they've
probably good things
maintained the
happening
state.
inside
That's the
North
most
Korea,
important part.
within North Korea for like the average poor person. It's probably not horrific as the West wants it to seem. I don't think that at all, right? But the reality of the situation is that if you ever make it anywhere in the North Korean state, you're a dead man walking. You can never advance, or else you will die.
Based
That's
Korea.
it. You become a threat to the Kim regime by advancing, but you also become an essence to the nation, an important person by advancing. The same thing will not work in America. It won't work almost anywhere. Like maybe Sweden, you might be able to pull it off in another really homogenous nation like that. Maybe.
Right. And that's why we're not look, and even Kim Il-sung said this, that a revolution can neither be imported nor exported. It has to be organic to the population. And in the United States, because of its multiracial nature, that's the intention of our federationalism.
It's also the justification for our economic model of industrial unionism, which is it's distinct
Exactly.
from traditional corporatism, where you have multiple guilds, or even syndicalism, where you have multiple syndicates. Industrial unionism is a specific type of libertarian syndicalism that was formulated with a single industrial trade union with a parliament of elected officials from the union that would control the economy. And our idea is you take this single union, you integrate it into the state, and you have it control the economy, essentially. And
That
it has
sounds like
I'm just
National
gonna-
Socialist Germany.
in one way, right?
Sounds a
Because
lot like it.
that's what the Labor Front was for, except it never was given any power, right? The one trade union concept, but like
we want to
is
put the
this one
Central
trade
Committee
union-
as
is this one trade
oversight
union-
for it.
Is this one trade union not comprised of a bunch of different trades, though? Right, so you have
It has
steelworkers,
internal
agriculture
syndicates for its own
Right,
industries, but the
so-
reasons why they're all grouped into one union is so they have stronger
So
bargaining power with
it's
the
like
government.
the legislator of fascist Italy in the 1930s, the Chamber of Corporations, which was all of those trade unions in Italy conglomerated into a single power.
Kinda, but at the same time,
That's exactly
industrial
what it is,
union.
right?
Well, the difference is they had specific guilds with its own
They
syndicate
did,
structure.
like at a local level, sure. But
these
at the
just have.
at the national level, there was only one, and that was the Chamber of Corporations, and it was.
I
made up
guess
of
it's just.
one.
I guess it's just
cohesive
syndicates. It's just syndicates with like one internal organization instead of having a much bigger internal organization like it was in Italy.
Well, in Italy, the local syndicates were purely for mediating local issues, and if you don't have that in this national unionism that you've like prefaced here,
Ours also only has workers. There's no owners in it.
Yeah, well, the Italian Chamber of Corporations didn't have any employers in it. That's not the employer guilds.
No, they're not. No, like employers don't exist at all.
Well, yeah, there's your fundamental difference, but as a whole, it's not different. When you look at it from the macro perspective,
well, there is a difference in the sense that like you have these people controlling the economy, but like you still have a representative form of government that's separate from that, and then
aren't they representative? What makes them not representative? They are effectively the people, except being organized.
Well, you have a separation between the economic sphere and the.
Like rather than being organized by regionality, right, by like your district or whatever, you're organized by your workplace. That's the fundamental difference between the representative government of quote unquote democracy and the representative government of a fascist state.
Yeah, so like we have representatives on a regional level because of the semi-autonomous republics, but we also have like an economic organization that is separate that has the
legislators.
Yeah, and then you have a central committee that has oversight and control over both.
So, does the central committee then have control over like them both at the same time, or are there two central committees?
It's more of it's an oversight.
All
one
power.
central committee. So
one central committee.
with all power,
all power in the committee.
If all powers put in the committee, why have 2 legislative bodies? Are they just, then just suggestive?
It seems like needless bureaucracy, and I'm a fascist.
You've curated a large bureaucracy in concept, right?
We're
and like
a
the lower
gigantic
house,
country. You need a large bureaucracy.
Yeah, you do need a large bureaucracy.
You need a streamlined bureaucracy. It can be large, but it needs to be fundamentally easily understood. 1 and 2.
That's why it's compartmentalized.
That's why you have. That's why you have them separated, because you need regional representation for the ethnic groups, and you need economic representation.
Representation work, because if you're not going to have the ethnic republics until things are stabilized, right? Until things are stable, then who is making social legislation in the meantime?
The Central Committee will be making all decisions.
So then why have these bodies? If they're until the curation of these autonomous ethnic republics.
even in a totalitarian dictatorship, the most extreme dictatorship you could imagine, there's somebody that's going to be deciding when the road gets repaired in your small town, and it's not going to be the dictator. There has to be.
Well, no, it's not going to be the dictator. It'll be his central committee, right? The central committee will say, "This is the fund."
Central committee oversees everything.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, wait. So you can have a union pass its own legislation, but if the Central Committee says we have a 5-year plan, then there's no deviation from that 5-year plan.
Exactly.
So then you have a 5-year plan where you want to produce 100,000 tons of steel, or say 1 million tons of steel out of one of your regions, right? Say, what's the biggest steel mill now in America? Is that still like Michigan area? Pennsylvania. There you go. All right, so in Pennsylvania, right, you say to the steel workers, we want 1 million tons of steel. Now the local union goes, that's fucking impossible. We can't do that. What happens to them?
You're going to do that.
They're going to do it no matter what.
Well, it's going to be the Soviet system where you just make it up.
No,
that's what it leads to. That's what it leads to. No, because that's what the Soviet Union did.
People have to lie about the numbers they
Soviet Union would go to the Ukrainian grain farmers, right? Their conglomerate, and they would go, Central Committee says we need 100 million tons of grain in the next 5 years.
Well, the difference is, though,
would work their fucking asses off. Let me just finish this, right? The Ukrainians would work their fucking asses off, but lo and behold, they only got 50 million tons of grain. What do? They lie. They go, we have 100 million tons of grains. Here it is. Right?
So
and they just lie.
There is a difference in the sense that, like, in our system, that we also advocate that there is like a form of market exchange that does happen within a socialist system, similar to China, because China has plans, but they also have a market with that economy that allows for distribution of goods and resources. The plans more or less have to do with taxation or which industries are going to have more.
The Chinese union has no power anymore. They're not allowed to strike. They're not allowed to suggest legislators. They're not allowed to do anything but exist.
Is any union in a dictatorial government really allowed to do that?
Yes. In Fascist Italy, they were capable of.
Yeah, they had a complex system of labor courts that protected the rights of both employers and employees.
And also,
something
the
that hasn't really been
passed
seen.
Legislator with or without Mussolini's approval. He had to argue with the Chamber of Corporations, and he did it quite often to pass his bills if he wanted them to go through and to pass his plans. It was only in the strict time of emergency that they gave him extensive powers to act.
Yeah, I have to disagree with this.
You can disagree if you want. It's just a fact. Up until 1939, even into 1940, Mussolini was still debating laws in the Chamber of Corporations.
No, like, I'm not disagreeing because, like, a fact. I'm just saying it's stupid that he had to do this.
Well, he did it because it massively boosted both his popularity and the productivity of Italy, because it allowed these unions to set their own quotas and their own.
The funny thing is, China has better productivity, but their unions are a part of the state.
And China's productivity is steeply declining.
What are you talking about?
It's increasing.
GDP growth
their GDP growth is increasing
year after year.
Yeah, the GDP. Hold on, the GDP is increasing. That is absolutely true. But GDP isn't the measure of total economic success. I said that before, right?
I understand, but they've overtaken the United States as the wealthiest
by
country
nature of population. You have to realize that China has 1.3 billion people.
They literally have 3 or 4 times the amount of people that
they have 5 times the population of the United States of America.
They did it in 20 years.
They didn't do it in 20 years. They did it in like 1949 to now. That's how long it's taken them to start to catch up.
Their real huge economic growth started right around 2000. Back then,
their real huge economic growth started during the
market reforms really didn't start happening until Deng Xiaoping, really. But.
Yeah, but that was in the 90s, wasn't it? Deng was a 90s guy.
Look, their average salary in China, in terms of relation to the dollar, in 2000, it was like $1,200. Today, it's 12,000. Next year, it's projected to be, if not next year, the year after, it's projected to be almost 18,000. They're growing their economy and the standard of living exponentially year after year. They lift 100 million people out of poverty into the global middle class per year.
Andrew, on paper, absolutely.
Bro, I've traveled there. I've been to Shanghai.
Yes.
If you go to a hotel there and you order a coffee, a robot will bring it to you.
The Chinese
leaps
have
and
been
bounds
caught lying on their papers over the last 20 years dozens of times, both on population, on market growth, on the strength of the yuan currency. They lie all the time about this because it's a necessity to maintain the national prerogative of them being a growing, great country, right? So they need to tell everybody that they're making money. I understand your point.
We got to go by what's accepted by the international.
We don't need to go what's accepted by the international.
I just want to butt in. When you're talking about Shanghai, you have to understand that Shanghai is one of the biggest cities in China, and it's also one of the most developed. And it's a city in eastern China that has existed for probably over 1,000 years at this point. Shanghai
is like one of the longest lasting cities in China. In fact,
Shanghai
it was
is
the
an
major
incredibly
point of European settlement in China.
Shanghai and eastern China in general are much wealthier areas than western China. If you go out to western China, it's still agrarian. It's still not industrialized. And
nobody said it's perfect, it's complete. What I'm saying is,
I'm not saying it's.
They are
not
competing us. Their system is working.
They're only
out
competing you because all of America has sent its industry to Mexico and India.
Because
that's why they're out competing you. Yeah, because you have capitalism. Because it is cheaper. It is cheaper for them to outsource labor to the third world. Absolutely, it's because of capitalism. But to put it in the macro perspective, Andrew, zoom out and look at what's going on. Right, America has deindustrialized and still leads China by some measure. Not a huge measure anymore, but just a bit. Right. America barely has any fucking industry left. Right.
It only maintains a lead because of the petrodollar, really.
Yes.
You can say that. You can claim that.
The dollar as global reserve currency is the source of the American empire. 100%.
That's the only reason why our currency hasn't hyperinflated too.
Well, I mean, it is hyperinflated, or at least.
What I mean by hyperinflation is like if the value. If the value, if the value wasn't there anymore, like the petro system, the currency would be so worthless you wouldn't be able to buy bread.
See, that's Hungary.
You're saying what it is.
The
way
or like Weimar Germany.
Yeah, in Weimar Germany, Hungary was worse. It would
like both places.
So much currency circulating in the system. Our government, by having the dollar as global reserve currency, is able to print infinity money and export the excess, preventing catastrophic level inflation.
Well, theoretically, all countries in the West, at least, who still maintain the American hegemony of the dollar, can infinitely print money because there's something they don't. What happens when they print money is they don't display all the money they printed. They display something like 1 or 2% of what they print.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what causes inflation. The rest is silently traded behind the scenes between corporations and banks and whatnot to pay interest on the loans that they take. Because all capitalist economies, this started in the 1800s, right, with the bourgeoisie revolution, are completely run on debt. They have to be. They can't operate without vast
MMT
debt.
theory.
They have to be run on debt, right? China doesn't live in that debt kind of society. It doesn't really matter, though, right, in the macro scale, because what impacts an economy, and China still trades on the international market, so this still applies to them, is the perception of strength of their dollar. It doesn't matter if you think it's because of the oil or because of their hegemony. It doesn't matter because it's just what it is.
This is actually the intention of BRICS, is actually to counter this, and this is also why
exactly what it is.
This is why you also had the Saudi Arabians have been talking with them a lot more, because like once they leave, the entire thing goes.
Well, I wouldn't say the Saudis would collapse it. I think UAE and Kuwait,
if they side with BRICS,
far
they
more
could.
Important. I don't think so. I think even if the Saudis signed with BRICS, it wouldn't significantly.
It would change the playing field. It would change the playing field.
But America still would remain dominant in oil because America produces a lot of oil, nationally. It does a lot, and has almost total control over Kuwait and UAE's oil reserves, which are vast, bordering on.
I mean, they also occupy part of Syria where its oil is
that
at
too,
too.
right? And they
Galen,
occupy
they shouldn't
Iraq.
be there.
They shouldn't be. I completely agree, but in reality, they do. So China taking, even if China takes like the Saudis, right, completely wins them over. I don't think they would completely win it over anyway, right? I think that the Saudis will play both parties equally. But anyways, say the you know.
I gotta say really
Chinese
quick, Andrew is the chairman of the party, not Heimbach, not me. You're a retard.
Yeah, what he said.
I mean,
Yeah,
people keep on assuming that Heimbach is like the chairman of the group, or I am. Like
you guys are the most famous.
Yeah,
yeah.
you guys.
Well, I can see why they think Heimbach is, right?
Yeah. Well, because he
sort of like
turned up at that rally.
the protest of the war, yeah.
Well, like when we were there, he was our lightning rod. Like he got us interviewed by Russia Today, and we were on Russian TV.
He's like a face,
well-known figure,
with renown.
Yeah, we got interviewed by. We were on Russian TV apparently
for like 30 minutes. It's pretty cool.
Anyways, even if they win the Saudis, which I don't think they will, the Chinese will not be able to destabilize the United States dollar enough to shift it towards the yuan or any other kind of international currency.
This is why I'm saying that a conflict between the West and China is inevitable. Is because our competition.
It is because China wants to expand its
eventually.
It could be within the next 5 years, according to McGregor.
Our conflict is our competition between one another is eventually going to go way beyond the scale of economics, and once it does, war is inevitable.
Andrew, hopefully we have a Red Dawn scenario.
I'm going to I'd like to pose this question to you. I'll state our point on it. Again, we oppose the global American empire, the gay. And so in any type of conflict between China and the gay, we would root for China. What would your guys' organization's stance on a conflict between gay and China?
I wouldn't root against my country. I mean, I have issues with the liberal establishment.
We don't have a country
and the way that, I mean, I think we do. I think that our country is severely broken. And this is something that I wanted to kind of touch on tonight, and I haven't really gotten the chance to yet. We have a tendency in dissident politics, whether on the left or on the right, to place blame on another. Oh, it's the bourgeoisie. Oh, it's my blacks. It's my Jews. The reality is that it's us. We fucked ourselves over. We continue to elect.
We willingly marched into capitalism.
We continue to elect politicians who we literally know. What's the phrase? Lesser of two evils. We literally know are bad people who use their positions for their own personal gain and oftentimes do things behind the scenes that they don't campaign on without the consent of the American people. But that does not mean, even with all of that, that does not mean that I would stand against my own country with another in the event of a war.
Right. And our opinion is the people in the people that run what used to be our country, that occupy the geography that used to be our nation, are occupiers and oppressors. They are not our country.
Yeah, we were like Subhash Bose, like when he fought against the Indian collaborators with the British Raj. Like they saw themselves as fighting for their country and also a part as a greater system. But
it's hard to say
Bose saw them as the greater threat.
I wouldn't use the British Raj as an example. I think Vaslov and his men in the Soviet Union are a far better example than the Raj, because the Raj wasn't free. It wasn't their own country. It was a governor.
Wait, we're not free either. We don't have a country.
That's a point of contention.
I would argue that we do
January 6th and like Twitter files is like proof enough for that.
Yes, we are an occupied people.
Occupied by who? Ourselves?
We've been occupied by like corrupt people since like Woodrow Wilson. Like every president we've had is corrupt.
People are coming from within. We're electing them. Those people didn't come in with force.
I thought you guys were just saying earlier in the debate that elections are fake and gay.
It's because it's a mafia state.
Those people are still coming in and being elected by people. And I would also be hard pressed to say that most of the politicians since, what did you say, Wilson, have all been mafia bought and paid for. There's a lot of money that moves behind the scenes, but the reality is that some of these people are just really good at talking to crowds, and it's because they're master manipulators. It's why they became politicians.
Bruh, at the start of this debate, you guys were suggesting that elections are fake. I mean, that was the.
I understand that. Okay, Are elections literally rigged? Probably not. But there's money that moves behind the scenes that makes things turn out a certain way. Right? You don't have to go and stuff ballot boxes if you can shape what people's perception of the world is before the ballot is even cast. That's why the American education system is the way it is. That's why social media is the way it is. That's why whenever you open TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram or turn on the TV, all you see is the same surface level, normie, liberal takes. You can find conservative takes like normie conservative takes, but there's much fewer places to find them. And in a lot of spaces, they're flat out banned. So I think that it's more of an insidious machination it's all about the public psyche, right? They're essentially manipulating what the public psyche conforms to before
It's
the
rigged.
election.
You're admitting it's rigged.
Yes, it's rigged. That's what I never said that it wasn't, but I said it's much more complicated than they're just going in and stuffing ballot boxes. There's a lot more that's happening behind the scenes. If it was that simple, it would be out in the open for everyone to see.
I mean, that's a point of contention.
I need to respond. Cornbread, we're not Wignats, and then also to Luca, we're not civic nets, because we understand that people can have their racial identities in autonomous zones. It's just that we're not focusing on chauvinism, which is what nationalism is. It's inherently a chauvinist, supremacist ideology. I mean, even if we focus on nationalism not as like entirely like racial, it's still chauvinistic because it still brings up civilizational supremacy.
Yeah.
Latin Western civilization supremacy, yada yada yada.
Well, do we have anything else that we need to? We've been going at it for almost 3 hours.
I think that's everything.
Do you guys have
apologies?
Anything else
I was away for a moment there. What did I miss?
Well, I know, like, and you guys, I know, like, when Andrew said race is real, you guys never got into like the science versus idealism stuff. That would have been funny.
Hey, I actually agree.
Because, like, my position, like, Fascist, is that race is all mentally constructed. So DNA is literally like a spook, and then our position's that's also what the Germans thought too, and we've like Andrew hates it.
Yeah, I disagree with that totally.
So
I believe in objective reality.
Push back on Zolt because I have the chance to now. And I'm not saying this to like antagonize you. I'm genuinely curious. Why do you believe that the Germans didn't conceive race in a biological manner?
Oh, because I believe it was defined more in a psychological manner, and my reasoning for that is for going through.
Yeah, Rosenberg.
I know about Rosenberg, but Rosenberg was also a retard and a minority.
But he was the majority of the racial theories. Hitler cites him several times and suggests that
he was the official propagandist.
He was the official race propagandist.
Nordicism was abandoned by 1936, though.
No, it wasn't. Rosenberg continued to be a huge part of the Nazi Party until.
I can also think of the paper from the New York Times where it talks about Hitler repudiates neo-pagans, like the whole like Nordicism thing.
It's not a neo-pagan, and Nordicism doesn't have to do with neo-paganism. It's about race.
Oh no, Nordicists are neo-pagans.
Some are.
I don't want to get distracted by something from 80 years ago. I'd like to know.
That's true.
What's your guys' take on race?
Race isn't real, right?
We don't believe that race is
it's
real.
not a reality. It's a conception that's promoted by the sociologists. It has nothing to do with reality.
Nothing.
And we find it morally repugnant that somebody would dictate that loyalties or abilities will derive from someone's skin color or ethnicity, however it be understood.
So you don't believe in biology?
I don't believe in race.
I believe
it has a biology.
Do you believe gender is biological?
I believe that
I believe that there's a man and a woman. Well, the term.
Do you think it's conscious? Do you think it's conscious? Is it a social construct?
Gender was constructed by Mooney, Dr. Mooney, who was a horrible pedophile, and I think that the concept of presenting his studies in any kind of way is disgusting. All right.
So, like the reason why I'm asking because of like race, which is typically viewed as biological by some people, wouldn't gender or like sex be?
Sex is real because sex is a physicality. Like you have a cock.
So is race.
No, race is pigment. It means nothing.
No,
it doesn't affect your ability to reproduce.
It's 100% incorrect.
It does not affect your ability.
I mean, if we're going by like a strictly materialist like argument, like race and biology are considered synonymous. Like if you're like a physicalist, like matter
Exactly. If you're a physicalist, you can rely on race, and you can point to other things.
No,
like
what I'm getting at is like if you say gender like sex is real, then it would rely on the matter argument.
Sex is different from race in a lot of ways. First of all,
How?
like
They're both
first
a
of all,
biological.
let me get to that. Let me get to that. Right. So race, which is pigmentation of skin and location of birth. Yes, it is. That is the fundamental doctrines of race. Anthropologists with their skull studies were completely disavowed and debunked in the 1930s.
What do you think about? So wait, this would be funny. What do you think about Alexander Dugin when he said that race is a social construct, just like gender?
Dugin's a fucking retard.
So,
I don't care what Dugin says.
I'm just saying that he said race wasn't real, just like how gender isn't.
You could agree with me or disagree with me. I don't care. He's a retard. Also, his Eurasia intentionally leaves out Ireland.
Let me just ask you.
What's up with
one
that?
simple question, real quick. There's drugs for heart disease, and the drugs usually used on white Europeans that were developed for white Europeans, they cannot be used on black Africans. They cause harm.
I mean, but that.
What is your explanation for that? I don't understand.
They
had to develop specific heart disease drugs for black people.
Here, let me put it like this.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to respond to that first. I want to respond to that first.
You can go, but I know you're going to go on longer than me.
Okay?
So listen. So let's just. I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second. Okay, let's assume that race is real. Okay, that race is totally real. That you could prove that it's definitely real. Even if that were the case, what bearing does someone's race have on their ability to be loyal to the state? Because I don't think that it does.
Right. Nobody said that. But there's a thing called epigenetics where okay, so let me point this out for you. It's not to diss on black people, but it's just a very convenient example. There's a let me look up the term for it. The warrior gene is what it's called, but I'll get the scientific term for it also. MAOA, the warrior gene, and it occurs more heavily in Africans than any other people, and it's been proven to control aggressive response to frustration. So if you have this gene, you have a greater likelihood to respond to frustration in your life with violence.
Also impulsiveness.
And it differs by ancestral groups. This is a direct bearing on culture. If a huge portion of the population is going to have a more violent response, culture will naturally become more violent.
So you're telling me that the most elite fascist combat battalions need to be composed of entirely black men. Is that what I'm understanding?
I didn't say anything of the sort.
I mean, that'd be pretty funny, but I would do it.
Differences always going to be based on race.
I don't really see race. I mean, okay, I see race as something
Kyle,
that is entirely material. Go ahead.
So, Andrew, you made a point about heart disease medication, right? I spent that 3 minutes doing a very quick rudimentary search. I found a study right off the bat that says that the separation of use between these two for the drugs, right, between white and blacks for heart medications, cardiac medications, right, was a difference of 0.04.
Ooh.
Right, so it's a minuscule standard of deviation between the two. Yes, there is. I'll give you that. In the biological sense, there was a small deviation between effectiveness. Black people in the study had a slightly less effective reaction to the heart medication than the whites did.
Yes, and they
didn't have to make a new one.
Medicine.
They didn't have to make a new one. Says the
they
study.
Did. I'll find the name of it right now.
Blacks are just slightly less effective in consuming.
The funny thing is, I actually taught. You guys know who Ubersoy is?
Who?
Ubersoy. Like, he's a race realist YouTuber. But basically, before this debate, I asked him for like a bunch of stuff on race, and I gave it to Andrew because like I don't really argue for biological race. It's gonna be kind of funny if he's gonna go through that document or not.
No. So I just want to clarify when I say like race isn't real. So it's not
that I'm saying that biology is not there. It's rather that I'm saying that biology is a material factor, and that what is
It has no
material.
impact on the ability for a man to be loyal and able
Yeah,
to the
exactly.
state.
And what is
I mean,
material
None
will ultimately
whatsoever.
always be subverted by what is immaterial. The American national unity, the spirit of collective, that has
Okay, so
been destroyed, and some people would argue that it never existed in the first place. But this is something that we can tap into and that
are
we
you
can
guys conceding
understand.
that race is a biological reality?
I'm saying that I'm sure that it exists on some biological level, but I don't think
Okay,
I think that the differences between whites and blacks or blacks and Asians is negligible.
I mean, we just say the
Almost
differences
non-existent.
exist. We just say the differences exist, but like we can still coexist in a system. But like the differences is that
We're not talking about
the differences is that you guys are
hating or
saying that
exterminating
they
any
don't
people.
exist
We're
at
saying that
all.
racial identity and ethnic identity is central to a person's makeup. So
I
trying
don't
to
think so.
just erase
I think racial and ethnic identity are not central at all. They don't define somebody's loyalty or ability. All they define
I mean,
is
what are you
where
talking
you're
about?
from.
People's tribe, their
But they
race.
vote.
Yeah,
They
but
vote. They
this
vote on
innate
racial lines too.
tribalism is detrimental to any nation state.
It's something that a fascist society seeks to break out of and revolt
Exactly,
against.
and destroy. This concept of race needs to be eradicated for national unity to advance.
It's not just race. It's more about anything that causes people to cling to something other than their
Yeah,
nation and
these
collective.
tribalistic notions, right? Whether it be race, ethnicity, religion, stuff like that, all of these differences that divide people and put them into groups, right? Need to go. They just need to disappear.
I mean, like you guys were saying earlier that you like are Christian, but like you're saying like religious differences have to go. Like, why not lean into it to let people have their differences and let them coexist instead of trying to actively like eradicate it in the
I'm
first
not
place?
Because
promoting state atheism.
we're not
I'm not
trying to
promoting
stay
state
with the old
atheism,
world. We're trying to create the
right?
new world.
Exactly. We're
I mean,
creating a new
if
world.
you're
I don't
eradicating the, I
promote-
mean, if you're
I don't
eradicating these
promote-
differences, like if a church opposes you guys on a single issue, you may not be like for state atheism, but let's say
if
that
a
church opposes you guys, you would
its
probably
land will
destroy
be
them.
nationalized. Yep. It doesn't. The faith, the people worshipping it, won't be punished. Right. A church that opposes a fascist state, it is just gone from that nation. Right?
Would you do that to
But
the
we don't-
Catholic
we don't-
Church or the Orthodox Church?
Absolutely. If the if the local Orthodox.
Could you understand why a Catholic or an Orthodox would say you're Antichrist?
Sure, I don't really care.
I don't
care.
I mean,
I
I
don't
mean,
care.
that's what you
You
guys
call me
are.
the
Like,
I mean,
how are you guys different than the Soviets? Then, like
there's
you're
gonna be-
complaining about.
Soviets?
going to
I
be
don't
a
complain
million
about the Soviets.
schizoid.
I've never complained about the Soviets. I
I
don't.
mean,
see
you
the
were when we were
Soviets
talking about
as enemy.
calculation error
Yes.
earlier.
What do you mean? What calculation error? What do you mean?
Calculation error is like the whole production quota shit that we were talking
The
about
5-year
earlier.
plan.
Oh, yeah, well, I was making a critique of their system. I don't hate the Soviets for their social activities. I think Lenin was a genius of a revolutionary. All right, I think that the Soviet state he was building was a great state. It wasn't as good as fascism, but it was great. Right? I have no hate for Lenin.
Do you guys
I don't
support
like
open
Stalin
borders?
much, but no, I don't support open borders.
We still want to close off immigration. We think
Net zero immigration.
No, not quite net zero.
No.
We want
There should still
But
be.
you want to
there should
erase
still be people who are
differences.
allowed. There should still people who
people
have
can
pre-existing
assimilate.
qualifications. People who are
Yeah,
coming here
but
and
to
being
assimilate
doctors.
people, you need cool off periods of immigration.
You do,
usually.
you do. That's why we want to bring it down to like an incredibly low immigration.
Yeah,
rate,
we
right?
I would be more on board with. I would be more on board with like net zeros. You need at least like 100 years of assimilation with all the people we've brought into this country.
I wouldn't say 100 years. I would wager that
I'm on
America
the,
could reasonably pull itself together with extremely low rates of immigration in 5 to 10 years.
I'm actually have the exact opposite take. I think we issue more visas, but we require that 2 visas be from Europe for every 1 visa issued for the rest of the world.
So
I don't think that we should put a limitation on anybody coming from anywhere except for the number. I think we should.
I think that
any
if-
nation
I think
should
that
lower
if
its
someone is
immigration rate
qualified-
extensively.
if someone
Exactly.
is
And
qualified,
we look
and
for qualified workers to come in and fill the gaps that already exist within systems. Right? It's inevitable that there's going to be huge gaps in a system. There are right now. There's a shortage of 1,000 things in every country. Right? Be it doctors, nurses, truck drivers, whatever. There's shortages everywhere. So if you find people to replace them in the short term, then you can lean into teaching people and training people for the long term. Right?
Yeah, and I mean our stance on it is that like people who are qualified should be and are willing to be loyal to the American state should be given that opportunity. It doesn't necessarily matter to me where the person is coming from, and more of what they can contribute to the state.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the crucial importance.
The National Bolshevik stance is that a nation is a people, and so that's what we go to. The folk and the economy united together form the state.
Our conception is that the state is composed of, well, in an ideally fascist system, the state is composed of all aspects of society working in cohesion with one another through the syndical system.
Yeah. I mean, we want the organic state as well, but I think probably our biggest difference is that we have an ethnic racial component to our philosophy.
So
see, we don't have that. We completely abhor the concept of bringing race or ethnicity into any kind of argument.
So you guys so basically like forced diversity, but like under different terms.
I wouldn't say forced diversity. No, nobody wants to force you to be diverse, right?
Yeah, we're not.
Nobody's. You're not.
I mean, if you're literally forcing people to have state mandated gentrification and mix everybody, that's what it is.
Mixing. No, nobody's deciding who loves one another, who marries one another. That's not what's going on.
How do you prevent? I'm going to ask the same question you guys had asked earlier. How do you prevent the tensions that have been happening for so long in American history?
Those tensions are
Who's driving, by the way?
Those tensions are propped up by liberalism and won't exist when concepts like race are destroyed under a fascist government.
So there's that. And secondly, right, there is a period of time in which the fascist state will conduct something called fascistization, right, where there is a great effort for, in the more brutal sense of the term, indoctrination of the population, right? For over this time, there's going to be a massive overhaul of things like the education system, like social life systems, like how you interact with people on the streets and whatnot. It is completely doable. It has been done before, in fact, successfully, with great results in Italy and in places like that, like Argentina, too, as well. Right, you saw these massive overhauls of the social systems, massive overhauls of the economic systems, massive overhauls of the education systems to both indoctrinate and to bring people around to the fascist system and to fascistize them so that they will be loyal citizens, right? So you prevent the issue of giving autonomy to these minority communities, which only encourages them to continue pushing you. Because when you bend to their desires, when you give them the BLM, the black power, or the segregation that they want, right? Then all you're doing is feeding the fire. You're feeding the desire.
You're feeding because what you're doing is you're instilling in their mind that there is an inherent difference between them and someone else, and as soon as you instill that in their mind, they won't want to collaborate with one another.
Exactly. So all these ethnic republics will just hate each other.
You have to convince them. You have to convince them that they. You have to convince them that they have more in common than they don't, and that's true.
The thing is, though, if you look at statistics on the people who think this way, like minorities vote more on minority grounds, and if you look at whites, it's usually whites that think more in these like non-racial terms where they want to interact with people.
It's because capitalism. This happened with the Irish and Italian communities in America too in the 1920s, 10s, and 1800s, because they were alienated from society indirectly. Like, there was segregation for blacks, but the social impact against the Irish is what drove them to vote for form things like Tammany Hall, right? Where they only voted for Irish candidates and they voted in Irish blocks, right? So you'd fight for the Irish vote.
All these ethnic differences still exist in the United States. The
Irish bloc doesn't exist
anymore. So, there's actually a study. There's actually a study you could look up called "Ethnic Diversity, Social Trust, and Narrative and Meta Analytical Review" that says that there's a stronger relationship for high trust in neighborhoods when they're ethnically homogenous.
I don't put much faith in liberal sociologists. I don't.
Okay, well, I mean, it's peer review, so you can't really argue against it.
Yeah, other liberal sociologists. I can't argue against it. I
I mean,
absolutely could argue.
I mean, you can. I mean,
I
you
still
can if
think
you say.
that-
I mean, you can if you say science ain't real
My
though.
argument against it
Well,
would
it's not.
be
It's
that
not
the
science. It's sociology.
Hold on,
It's sociology, not science.
hold on. My argument against that would not be that the sociologist is a liberal, but
You can also
rather
talk about diversity and innovation, which found that innovation actually decreases because of diversity, or that diversity, or that multi-ethnic workplaces are usually used to create disorder.
when you're living in a society that promotes people's differences and antagonizes them based on their differences. Yeah, I'm sure productivity does go down. That's not a fascist state.
You just keep like all of this is through the lens of being in a liberal state where this.
I mean, you guys are antagonistic though, because you were basically talking about destroying the Catholic Church earlier if it went against you.
And
I mean, yeah, it's antagonistic.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
It's
about
antagonistic
that.
to the Catholic Church.
To be fair, for full disclosure, Seamus is a lot more futurist than me on a lot of these issues. Like
I know he wants to abolish the family and put the military in charge.
I would probably.
I don't want the military in charge.
Yeah, no,
I want the military disbanded.
Yeah,
I don't want a
rid of the
military.
fucking.
I want a national militia.
Disband the family, abolish the family.
This is something.
It's from
Seamus
futurist
disagree
writing, critical writings of Marinetti.
Is the national militia? This is something that me and Seamus disagree on. Like,
isn't that LARPing
though? There are fascists
what's LARPing? What's LARPing?
And there are fascists who are not, and there are fascists who are somewhere in between. I would kind of count myself as somewhere in between. I believe that we can create a new culture and that we can get rid of a lot of these ideas and concepts that are inherent to liberalism. But I'm not saying go out there and, burn down the churches and mass orgies in the streets like in Fume, because, that's a little excessive. But I think that the point can still be made without doing those things. You get what I mean?
Right. And,
what's
we actually have basically the exact opposite take, that we have to lean into the family and ethnic pride and et cetera, in order to achieve our aims.
God, family, God, family.
That's also just
country.
Clarification.
God, family, country, ethnicity.
Like, I agree with you on that. I'm pro-family too. Like, Seamus and I argue about this all the time. There's never going to be a total consensus even within one movement, and that's kind of the thing that I guess maybe a neutral observer can take away from tonight, if they take away anything. So I don't know. I've got to get out. I've got to get off here because my girlfriend wants me to come home and go to sleep. So
all right, yeah.
But I really appreciate you guys debating with me, man, and having a conversation with us. Like that sort of stuff is what really matters, because you're actually just talking about shit. Putting it all out on the table.
Hopefully people stop saying we're the same group.
Yeah, and hopefully people stop accusing both of us of being Wignats, because that's what.
Wait, was there people calling you guys Wignats?
Yeah, somebody was calling us Wignats in the chat.
Yeah, they were calling. We were getting called Wignats by people on Telegram.
We do like closing statements.
Yeah, I guess. Sure. Go ahead first, Andrew. Go ahead.
All right, so. For my closing statement, I'm just going to explain the 3 principles that the PSF is based on. We believe in a social economy that works for the people, as well as for the benefit of the civilization state. This social economy needs to unite the people and the state into an organic unity that's designed to uplift the common man, not just the elites or the bourgeoisie, the people who have control of the means of production, but the real working man, the salt of the earth, the real Americans. We believe a people is not simply those who share a state, but its common culture, identity, and origin, and it exists in both a spiritual, metaphysical, but also a biosocial sense. The current USA is composed of many different, you could call them nations, and ethnic groups. And we seek liberation and national self-determination for all of these peoples. And we affirm that ethnic, racial, and cultural identities are not distractions, but they're in fact strengths for the revolutionary vision of the future. Identity and self-determination, but also rejection of hate. This kind of ethnic pride and, being able to know yourself, know your heritage, be proud of it, and do it without hate will make a stronger country and a stronger revolution. Contrary to many other left-wing groups who, tend to embrace only the material, we're also motivated by, kind of Evolian ideas, specifically heroic idealism, but we remain grounded and mindful of material conditions. So like a synthesis of materialism and idealism.
Platonism.
Exactly. The truth is liberalism and everything it represents, especially this global American empire. It's a nihilistic drive towards emancipation, but from social restrictions. But what it's only ever done, this liberalism, has succeeded in supposedly freeing us, but freeing us from the principles that gave life meaning and allowed man to free himself from himself and to seek alienation of the I in greater purpose, in the group, in the family, in God, in his religion, in his folk, in his nation. And this nihilism can only be destroyed by destroying liberalism. It's delivered a senseless hedonism and ever-increasing atomization of the society. And the way to defeat atomization is identity. We seek to destroy this and bring dignity back to human life, and I mean specifically American human life, both spiritually and in material terms. And having said that, we are the Patriotic Socialist Front. And good night, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. So for me, first off, I want to start this by responding. Number one, John G., you're wrong. Fascism actually is a universal concept that was affirmed at the Montreux Conference. What year was that? 1934? And then they did another one the next year in 35 too. Yeah. Second, the person who said, without a racial component to your third positionism, you're missing the point. You've missed the point of third positionism. The point of third positionism, all third positionism is a rejection of capitalism and socialism. That's it. You're proposing an alternative model to those two systems. To meet the criteria of third position, you just simply have to be that. Now, that category beyond that encompasses a broad variety of groups, some of which have a conception of race, sure, some of which don't have a conception of race. But either way, that's what third positionism is. If you're going to say that someone else is missing the point, regarding third positionism, at least know what third positionism is first. Secondly, the main thing I wanted to accomplish tonight was a mission that I admittedly think has gone pretty well, is education all around. For the fascist, I wanted them to know what the Patriotic Socialist stands for so that they can at least engage with them properly, and vice versa. And for the person who is not a fascist and not a patriotic socialist, at least now they know what both of us stand for. And I think that that's really the most important thing to come out of this. I enjoyed talking to you guys. It was a real pleasure for you guys to have me, and I would love to do this again in the future with or without a live stream. It would be cool to just talk to people with different opinions.
Sounds good.
That's all about that's about all I have to say. Sorry, we are the National Fascist Party. You can find us at americanfascisti.org, t.me/the Fascist Party. Yeah. Good night, everybody. Ave.
Anybody else? Is that it?
Yeah, if anybody wants to check out Patriotic Socialist Front, they can go to patsockfront.org or patsockfront.substack. They can find our mission statement, our political program.
He's playing fucking outro music.
What the fuck?
He's got fucking outro music.
What the? All right, well, yeah. Also, Zoran Zoltanis on YouTube, and I have the Fascio.substack that people can also go subscribe to. I don't really have much to say other than that. Yay 2024.
yeah, yay 24. Yay 24. Yeah.
Thanks all for coming on. Thanks all for coming on. It's been a great talk. Good to reconnect with you there, Zolt. Without any hostility in the air between us. And good to meet you here, Andrew.
Yeah, nice to meet you guys too. Good night, gentlemen.
If it doesn't get re-uploaded, I'll re-upload it, boy.
Thank you, guys.
Boy.
Good night.
I did not expect the outro music.
Yeah, I didn't either.